Hello everyone, hope you're well. Welcome along to another Saturday session. Now for today's Saturday session, it is the Scamtarctica Supercut. This is every single episode that I did debunking the Flat Earth documentary Scamtarctica, all linked together in a massive video. Enjoy your Saturday, sit back, relax and watch the total documentary being debunked in full. Cheers. Now, if you remember my debunkings of the Flat Earth documentary Level, you'll know that I did so in several parts. And then once all the parts were released, I put together a giant supercut of all the parts together on the channel. And we're going to do exactly the same thing here. So this today is part one of debunking the documentary Scamtarctica. Let's do this.
This is the globe map of the 46 main bases on the alleged continent of Antarctica. The 9 bases circled in red in the top left of the Antarctic Peninsula do not have any periods of 24-hour sunlight, and there are many more bases on that peninsula tip, all the same. The globe model says this is because they are too far north of, or just outside of, the circle of latitude that would constantly be facing the sun during the period of September 21st through March 23rd every year at the extreme South Pole, for example, or from as short as only December 10th through January 3rd every year at the outermost or northernmost circle of latitude.
Right out the gate, we're dipping into conspiracy buzzwords. Let's be clear, Antarctica isn't alleged. It's very real, extensively mapped, home to thousands of scientists every year, and visible on live satellite feeds from multiple sources, not just NASA. And by the way, he's correct when he's talking about those particular bases. They're too far north to see the 24-hour sunlight. Only locations south of the Antarctic Circle experience continuous daylight during the summer months. The closer you get to the South Pole, the longer that period lasts. On that particular peninsula though, you just get extremely long days, but not 24-hour sun.
Due to the Earth's alleged 23-degree tilt, keeping those extreme and small southern circles of latitude constantly facing the sun during these months. Obviously, the 37 bases circled in yellow are all inside that latitude ring, which is why they have, or at least claim to have, various time periods of 24-hour sunlight every year in these months.
Again, this tilt is not alleged, it's measured. Now, our narrator here refers to a small southern latitude circle continuously facing the sun. That's not quite how it works. No part of Earth is constantly facing the sun. It's rotating, remember? But as we've already said, during the southern hemisphere's summer, there are parts within the Antarctic Circle that experience 24 hours of sunlight. And also, they don't claim to have had 24-hour sunlight. They have had 24-hour sunlight. It's documented by researchers, explorers, tourists, and even random YouTubers. You can actually watch time-lapse footage of the sun circling the sky in Antarctica.
As my friend Jaron said, who has actually recently been to one of those camps, here at Union Glacier Station, and yes, they were there. Despite all of the endless theories and conspiracy theories abound about whether they were really there or not, or whether the apparent 24-hour sun that they witnessed and filmed was real or advanced technological fakery. None of that has anything to do with the hard data and evidence presented in this film.
So Spacebusters is happy to say that they actually did go to Antarctica, which puts this debate square in the framework of what actually Antarctica is. Makes things much more simple.
Whoa. So all will agree there are latitude lines on Earth. 90 degrees at the North Pole, then heading down 66 degrees at the North Circle, maybe 40 degrees at New York, 25 degrees in Miami, and 0 at the equator. Then down 20 degrees in mid-South America, 50 degrees at Punta Arenas, 66 at the Southern Circle, 79 at Union Glacier, and 90 degrees at the South Pole. What I realized is that if you move the latitude around the globe, the daylight hours never change. More impressive is that they all, without exception, remember that, match exactly their counterpart. Remember that. So if the daylight hours are 15 hours in New York, then every single place on that latitude all the way around the Earth is the exact same daylight on that day, unquote.
And this is pretty much true from Jaren here. The only difference being is that local sunrise and sunset times will differ slightly because of time zones. For example, Southampton, near where I live, and Calgary in Canada are on very similar latitudes. On the day of writing this script, they both have around 16 hours 32 minutes of daylight, but their local sunrise times differ by around 30 minutes. And that's because time zones are messy. They don't always line up perfectly with lines of longitude.
Good. I'm glad you get that and agree. Because if we live on a globe, then what you said has to apply to the latitude circles in the Antarctic and South Pole as well.
Absolutely, and guess what? It does. That's the point. Every research base located along a particular line of latitude in the south, say 75 degrees south, will get the same amount of daylight on the same day. The sun's arc and daylight duration is dependent on latitude, just like everywhere else on Earth.
So one station on the exact same latitude line as any other station there has to have not only the exact same daylight time, but also the exact same length of days for a 24-hour sun. Because as you said, every single place on that latitude all the way around the Earth is the exact same daylight on that day.
That is mostly true, but I've got one caveat. The visibility of the sun also depends on local conditions. For example, if one base is in a valley surrounded by mountains and the other is in a wide open ice shelf, the sun might dip below the terrain in one location but not the other, even if both are at the same latitude. Also, due to atmospheric refraction, a station might see the sun for longer than you would expect geometrically. That's well understood and predictable on the globe.
That means one station here cannot be having 5 extra days of a 24-hour sun daylight, while the exact opposite is not also having the exact same 24-hour sun daylight for those same 5 days.
Actually, it can, and it often does. And that's not a glitch in the globe model. It's a perfectly expected result of how the Earth tilts and rotates. Let's be clear. If two stations are on the exact same latitude, on a flat terrain with the same atmospheric conditions, they will experience the same duration of the 24-hour sun. That is true. But if one station is slightly north or south of the other one, even by a degree or two, the number of days they get 24-hour sunlight will differ.
And if that's not only not happening, as Jaren says it has to happen on the globe, for all Antarctic bases on the same exact latitude, either around and across from each other, but that's not even happening either for the bases only 50 to 170 miles away from each other on both the same latitude and even nearly the same longitude, which, as you'll see, is the case, then Houston, we have a problem.
There are no Antarctic research stations on the exact same latitude. Stations are based on statistics and national convenience, not celestial alignment. Even a 0.1 degree difference in latitude matters when it comes to polar sunlight.
As my brother Jaren said in his own words, and I love you, brother, if you map the Earth on a sphere, then every sunrise time and angle is predicted and explained and accounted for every single location there is on Earth, the entire globe and all places on it, and for every day for the entire year and years into the future, which means in record time, since only just over 1 month ago in Antarctica, Jaren must have double-checked every single location there is on Earth, which even a supercomputer couldn't easily do in a month, if at all, to be sure of this statement, even though only 3 short sentences later he admits, I will say I came to this realization. It would be impossible, straight up impossible, for them to map every location on Earth and correctly account for sunrise and sunset on any model at all, unless it were the truth. So the sphere Earth is the truth, and no one has ever been able to correctly map this place at all unless they place us on a sphere.
Geraint didn't need to check every single location on the globe. That's the point, because the globe model is based on predictable geometry. It works everywhere, all the time. You don't have to manually check each point on the map. You check the math once, and it works for all of them. That's what makes it a model. Geraint gets it right here, when he says it would be impossible to correctly account for sunrise or sunset on any model unless it were the truth. And the model that does correctly account for all of this is a spherical Earth.
Even though Nicole Murphy from Law of the Luminaries and I just explained in under 2 hours exactly how to easily do that on a Gleason flat map, and even designed software if your budget and time allowed. Once you understand the 7 movements of the apparent sun and moon, their position between the tropics based on the clock and calendar designed to do just that, mixed with the understanding of the sky wheel, the analemma, and the daily 1 degree sun angle altitude shift and 13.22 degree moon angle altitude shift up and down the cone-shaped vortex, which can be double-checked with a compass and your own 2 eyes once you study and understand it, which the secret societies and Jesuits who run the world do.
What? No flat Earth map has ever correctly predicted any of those things. Not sunrises or sunsets or solar eclipses or solar noon or shadow angles or daylight hours across the Earth. The Gleason map fails completely when you try and do this, especially in the southern hemisphere. This whole explanation just then boils down to, if you believe hard enough, it will work. It throws in real terms like solar analemma and mixes it with invented ones like sky wheels. And then hand waves it all away with, if you study it deeply enough, then you'll get it. And by the way, when your argument relies on blaming ancient religious orders for hiding sunlight geometry, you've officially left science and entered Dan Brown fan fiction territory.
The only place it still works visually from the ground, but doesn't work trying to computer map base locations, is on the alleged globe map of Antarctica, because Antarctica is a giant ice ring on the Gleason map, and the bases would actually be scattered around parts of it. And as you'll see, the globe software clearly doesn't work even remotely accurately on Antarctica either, as Geraint claims.
Is he suggesting that globe-based software like timeanddate.com breaks down when you try and apply it to Antarctica? Well, that's nonsense, because it doesn't. People at Antarctic bases, scientists, engineers, tourists, they use globe-based tools every day. If the globe model didn't work in Antarctica, none of that would function properly. In fact, it works so well that we can accurately predict exactly when the 24-hour sun will start and end at each base, the exact azimuth and altitude angle of the sun at any time of day, and the number of daylight hours, weeks, or months into the future.
I'm admittedly one of the old-school non-supercomputer models, so while I couldn't possibly map every single location on Earth, I was able to do exactly that for every one of these 46 main Antarctic bases on the only 2 different official websites available. And all I have to say, Geraint, is you keep saying that word accurately. I do not think it means what you think it means, as the overwhelming forthcoming evidence will demonstrate.
Well, this should be interesting. Actual data recorded by a flurf. This has definitely piqued my interest.
Before that, astute and discerning attentive minds might have already noticed out of curiosity, there were 5 Antarctic bases of major interest, all in the alleged 24-hour sun zone, that I was simply unable to find data for on when and how long that 24-hour sun period lasted at those bases. That doesn't mean the data doesn't exist, so I urge you to go do your own research and see if you can find it. Don't take my word for it. Look for yourselves and let me know. While it proves nothing, and I don't want to use it as speculative fluff to add to the other real, hard data I have already collected.
A refreshing attitude to take here by this flat earther, but it is an odd admission. The 24-hour sunlight period for every base in Antarctica can be calculated precisely using globe-based solar models, even if a particular station hasn't published this information. If he genuinely wanted to know, he could have plugged that base coordinates into one of those models, and he would have had his answer in seconds.
It is quite curious, out of pattern recognition, that every single one of them just coincidentally happens to be within only 50 to 170 miles away from a listed base with checkable 24-hour sun dates and times. So you and I aren't easily, if at all, able to compare any glaring inconsistencies between those two neighboring bases.
Like I said, he could have found that data if he really wanted to.
That said, we luckily have a few other close together sets of bases we can cross and double check to see this is all made up bullshit, along with a pile of other hard forthcoming evidence. Again, this is not to troll my friend Jaren. He is honestly asking for an explanation and not name-calling, and that's what this film is. Quote, he found evidence today that cannot be explained in my mind. That doesn't mean, Jaren, it can't be explained. That's called Plato's cave, or an either-or logical fallacy.
Something that flat earthers do all the time. Explanations cannot be understood. Therefore, they do not believe it. It happens every day.
If your mind can only comprehend option A or B, but the reality lies within options C through Z, you have to choose one false reality A or B over another because your mind has not examined the other options C through Z, and your ego cannot simply say, undetermined at this point. I don't know for certain yet. I'm still searching.
Wow, yeah, every flat earther ever right there.
Playing around with the Andrew Marsh globe model for the last couple of hours is a great start, but to call that pretty damn conclusive, now the community needs to check that against other programs and websites to make sure they even match each other, and then have boots on the ground to double-check reality versus computer models. Not just playing around on models for a few hours and making blanket statements like the globe predicts every sunrise and sunset of every place and every year. Except when they don't.
But all those tools are built on the same maths and physics, not guesswork. The sun's apparent position in the sky at any time, on any day, from any place on Earth. It's governed by predictable mechanics. Earth's rotation, its axial tilt, and its orbit around the sun. That's why we can model it, and that's why it works. And we've had boots on the ground in Antarctica for decades. Thousands of scientists from dozens of countries live and work there every year. And many of them have documented exactly what the globe model predicts.
Suspiciously, there are only two major online sources to consult when checking the dates the alleged 24-hour sun periods stop and start at these bases, length of days on the days just before and after, sunrise and sunset times on those days, and solar noontime for these bases on Antarctica. They are timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info.
Straight away, this is incorrect. There is the Australia Antarctic Programme website, the NOAA website as well. That's another two right off the bat.
This in itself is strange and a very easy way to control and fudge information. And again, there may be other software, apps, etc. So the community now needs to double check my data and check other sources against this. I was able to find a third site, sunrise.maplogs.com, that had stats on 5 of the 46 major bases of interest for another comparison.
So you claim there were only 2 and then you come up with another one yourself. Is this guy for real?
And Jaren, you might want to hold off on that NASA t-shirt just yet. You're about to be space busted.
Hey, that's me. I'm famous.
Let's start with the accuracy and reliability of this globe model's ability to at least predict what day the alleged 24-hour sun period starts and finishes for each base. Here's McMurdo Station, allegedly located on the inner 77.5 south latitude ring. According to dateandtime.info, the 24-hour sun period starts October 22nd, yet according to sunrise.maplogs.com, it doesn't start until October 23rd, a whole day later. And according to timeanddate.com, it doesn't start until 2 days later on October 24th.
Okay, first off, you expect us to listen to you about all this information, yet you can't even read latitudinal coordinates correctly. McMurdo Station is 77 degrees and 50 minutes. That's 77.8 degrees, not 77.5, as the minute units is out of 60, of course. Secondly, the NOAA website says October the 23rd, the same as sunrise.maplogs. But this is not the big point that you think it is. Each site may define 24-hour sunlight differently. For example, some count the first day as the day that the sun doesn't set at all. Others might wait until even the upper edge of the sun remains above the horizon for 24 hours, rather than the whole disk. They might also use different rounding conventions and slight variation in station coordinates or elevation assumptions. All can lead to a one-day shift, especially when you're that close to the threshold. If your entire argument hinges on this, on whether the sun stays fully above the horizon on October the 22nd or the 24th, but all three sources agree that it happens around then, you've accidentally shown how robust and predictive the globe model is.
This is an error rate of 2 whole days, and none of the three even agree. And yet, when you look at the dates they allege the 24-hour sun ends and periods of dusk or sunrise sunset start, suddenly date and time and date both agree it's February 20th. Yet they were off by 2 days from each other when it starts, and sunrise.maplogs claims the 24-hour sun ends a day before that, on February 19th.
I think our friend is missing the entire point here, and that is that all these websites agree that the sun doesn't set for months, which would be utterly impossible on any flat earth model. It's not just unproven, it's geometrically impossible, as the final experiment showed.
So while for McMurdo Station, date and time are clearly showing 24-hour sun starting October 22nd, still there the 23rd and 24th, so there are no sunrise sunset stats or day lengths to track and report. Simultaneously, timeanddate.com are giving a very specific sunrise and sunset time on the 22nd, where date and time just said it was already a 24-hour sun. Even an incredibly specific day length time of 22 hours, 57 minutes, and 38 seconds down to the second, and have a partial 1 hour and 2 minute period of nighttime from 12:40 a.m. until 1:42 a.m. on the 23rd, when again time and date said it had already been a 24-hour sun that day and the whole day before on the 22nd.
Now, I thought I would check to see how this looked on the piece of software Stellarium. And lo and behold, at 12:40 a.m, when time and date says the sun sets, this is how it looked. Now, you may notice in the bottom right corner the time is not correct. I had to use UK time as it was not adjusted for that. But you can clearly see that a small portion of the sun is still just above the horizon. This means that there will clearly be differences across different platforms. Fully expected.
And sunrise.maplogs is also showing very specific sunrise, sunset, and day length times for October 22nd, where date and time claim it was already a 24-hour sun. And by the way, sunrise.maplog's sunrise, sunset times for the 22nd are off by 13 to 18 minutes from time and date, despite both giving details of their alleged certainty down to the second. How can you both be certain to the second of your accuracy and be off from each other so wildly, up to 1 or 2 whole days?
Just because a website claims to know the time down to the second, that does not mean it knows the cosmic truth down to the second. It's just reporting data in a precise format, based on its internal model and assumptions. Now, if one model includes refraction, observer altitude and the sun's upper limb, and another does not, then you are going to get differences in minutes, especially in extreme locations like Antarctica, where we've already seen the sun skims the horizon at very shallow angles. The models aren't broken, they're just slightly different versions of the same globe-based system. And the fact that you're arguing over minutes is proof of how well they work, not how badly.
McMurdo Station is only 1 kilometer or just over a half a mile long. Imagine it's October 25th, and you have to interview 3 different people sitting a few blocks down from each other in McMurdo Station. The pink one claims they saw the sun go down for brief dusk or dark October 22nd, and then saw 2 days of the sun in the sky for 24 hours on the 23rd and 24th. But the blue one says, no, I was also here. I saw the sun go down for dusk or dark on both the 22nd and 23rd, and then yesterday on the 24th was the first day the sun never went down. And the green one says, no, you're both wrong. I was also here, and the sun never went down on the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th. The 21st was the last day I saw a brief period of dusk or dark.
We're talking about solar geometry here, not personal opinion. What this part accidentally does is highlight something. How small differences in perception, position and definition can explain apparent contradictions. Are you trying to argue against yourself here?
At least 2 of them have to be lying. They can't all disagree and all be correct. But how do you know who's lying? They could all 3 be lying for all you know. Especially when you ask them when they saw the alleged 24-hour sun period end and brief dusk or darkness return. And suddenly, the blue and green both agree on the same day, February 20th, when they disagreed by 2 days in October, and the pink claims, no, I saw a period of dusk or darkness the day before on the 19th.
Why are you talking about lying? This isn't a Hercule Poirot story. Besides, all this is that when the sun hugs the horizon, a few minutes or meters or degrees makes a difference. That's not contradiction, it's a globe in action.
Would you base an entire belief system on their inconsistent testimony, saying, close enough, like Jaron? Or would you smell a rat and investigate all of the bases? To save this film from being 8 hours long, I've spent 2 weeks putting it all into spreadsheets rather than showing you 400 screenshot comparisons. But again, go double check my work. Don't be lazy and blindly trust my spreadsheets like Jaron trusts Globe software. Good research is verifiable.
I have no doubt in your research. In fact, I get why you wanted to be so thorough. I just think you're misinterpreting your results, as I've already explained.
Be aware that timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info are both using a same standard time zone for all 22 bases out of the 46 that they both have information on. But sunrise.maplogs.com is using 5 different time zones, so you have to subtract 5 hours for Casey, 7 hours for Vostok, 6 hours for Davis, and 3 hours for Dumont d'Urville to get them to the same zone as the others. And no, that is not proof of this. That works the same if the bases are scattered around the edge of the ice wall in reality. Even better, as you'll see.
Oh, will we now? Will we see it work even better? Can't wait for this.
Back to McMurdo, we've already seen that they can't agree what day the alleged 24-hour sun starts and ends each year. The last day all 3 agree there wasn't a 24-hour sun was October 21st. So I checked the length of day on that day to see if they at least agree on that, since they're all sitting within a half mile of each other, and then the sunrise and sunset times to see if they at least agree on that. Sunrise.maplogs, doesn't track the solar noon, so those are on the other charts we will examine soon.
Again, this isn't suspicious, this is normal, especially when comparing tools that use different coordinate inputs for McMurdo Station, may or may not adjust for elevation, terrain obstruction or refraction, and possibly round sunrise or sunset times to the nearest minute or second.
Sunrise.maplogs and timeanddate.com seem to agree close enough for even me within 14 exact seconds on the length of day October 21st. But dateandtime.info says the day was 27 minutes longer. I don't know if that's what Jaron means by if you map the Earth on a sphere, then every sunrise and sunset time and angle is predicted and accounted for every single location there is.
Let's be clear here, this isn't a problem with the globe. It's a problem for dateandtime.info. That particular website is known for being less precise, especially when it comes to polar daylight modelling. It's likely rounding aggressively or using a simpler algorithm that doesn't actually account for things we've already talked about, like refraction or observer's elevation or the definition of what a sunrise and sunset actually is. I looked at it myself and it does look pretty dodgy to me. If two independent tools agree within 14 seconds and one outlier disagrees by 27 minutes, the rational conclusion is that the outlier is off, not that the entire model is broken.
McMurdo Station is on the 77.5 south latitude.
Again, got that wrong, you can't read coordinates. Not surprising for a flurf, but there we go.
On the globe model, the equator at 0 latitude has to be spinning at 1,040 miles per hour to make a 24-hour day, because it is said its circumference is 24,901 miles around there. So down where McMurdo is at 77.5 south latitude, the circumference around is smaller, so it must be spinning slower to make the exact same rotation as the equator in 24 hours. Simple enough.
Except when we look at rotational speed, 15 degrees per hour, we can see that it's exactly the same.
That rotational speed at McMurdo would be just over 225 miles per hour, or 3.75 miles per minute. If the day were 27 minutes longer, that's over a 101-mile visible sun distance for a third measuring station located within a half-mile of the other two. And this gets more ridiculous as these day-length discrepancies reach over an hour to 2 hours and 20 minutes from each other, as you'll see.
Well, the issue is obviously dateandtime.info then, isn't it? So let's have a look at what dateandtime.info themselves say about how the website works. They explain that it was developed to provide correct and relevant information about time zones and time differences. That's fair. It's primarily a world clock and time zone tool, not a dedicated solar calculator. Then they list the technologies used: CentOS, Apache, MySQL, PHP, jQuery, all perfectly normal web stack stuff. But here's what is not listed. No mention of solar position algorithms. No reference to astronomical models. No evidence for accounting for anything like Earth's axial tilt, solar declination, observer altitude, or atmospheric refraction. Instead, the only scientific source they mention is the TZ database. That is a time zones database. Now that's great for telling what time it is in Toronto or Tokyo, but it doesn't calculate the position of the sun in the sky. In other words, they're not solar modelers. They're time zone calculators. Now let's see what timeanddate.com use. They use the VSOP87 planetary theory, refraction correction algorithms, precise geolocation and elevation handling. That's why timeanddate.com is so trusted by scientists, teachers, software developers, and why it agrees with NASA, NOAA and Stellarium. Within seconds as well. Even in Antarctica. So the issue here is clearly your choice of dateandtime.info. And at the moment you're basing your entire argument off of it. Dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Australia's Casey Station, allegedly 1,615 miles away. A massive 3-day discrepancy between what date the alleged 24-hour sun starts. But at least 2 of them agree, yet dateandtime.info claims it starts 3 days earlier on December 7th. Then, suddenly, all 3 disagree on when it ends. And dateandtime.info now claims it ends 2 or 3 days later than the other two, claiming a whopping total of 5 to 6 more days of 24-hour sun, almost off by a week.
This again is excellent evidence to suggest that this website, dateandtime.info, is not good enough for this sort of thing. Remember, in the last episode we established it was more of a world clock website than anything else.
You call that accurate, Jaron? Because even though sunrise.maplogs had no info on them, I have a sorted list of 18 different bases in the alleged 24-hour sun latitude circle that all have anywhere from 1 to 5 days of total error and discrepancy between timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info.
Now, here the narrator pulls out what seems like a damning statement. 18 bases and 1 to 5 days of error. But let's be clear. The closer you get to the South Pole, the blurrier the idea of sunrise and sunset becomes. These websites aren't contradicting reality. They're just interpreting long polar twilight differently. Like we discussed in the last part of this series, you could just as easily say it's a feature of the globe model, not a flaw.
The largest one being 19 days. In fact, there wasn't even a single base that both websites had information on together that didn't have a discrepancy and at least agreed on the total days of 24-hour sun, never mind what dates they allegedly start or stop on, which, by the way, was only 2 out of the 18. One agreed which date it allegedly stopped on, but not which date it started on, and the other one agreed on which date it started on, but disagreed by 2 days on what date the 24-hour sun ended.
So we're told then that 2 daylight tracking websites don't agree exactly on the dates when each Antarctic base experiences 24-hour sun. But think about that for a second. These aren't direct observations, they're models. And when you're near the poles, like I said, a tiny difference in elevation, latitude, or modelling assumptions can shift those dates by a few days. This isn't a smoking gun like you think. It's what you'd expect from precision modelling of a complex system. Expecting 2 daylight websites to match perfectly for Antarctica is like expecting 2 different weather apps to give you the exact same weather for the same location. The physics isn't wrong, your expectations are.
Astute minds will say, hang on, maybe one of them is really correct and the other one is just dodgy and way off. That's what I first thought as I looked at all the data, but there are a few problems with that. One, I've already showed you. They keep taking turns flip-flopping with no consistent pattern of inconsistency, just as you see here. One time they both agree on the end date of the 24-hour sun for the alleged South Pole Amundsen-Scott base, but disagree on the start date. Yet for Belgrano 2 base, they both agree on the start date, but not the end. Another problem is, this is it. These are the 2 major sites that come up online to find this information. The top dogs and nearly only dogs.
And this we addressed in the last episode too, because of course they're not the only sites. There are an absolute raft of websites where you can find this information. I mentioned a few last time out. This is an appalling tactic from the Flurf here, because if no one checks this statement, then they're likely to believe it.
Shouldn't they both be using the immaculate globe model software and predictions Jaron claims they possess if they are the 2 most trusted sources of this information? Why hasn't the professional community challenged this if one is dodgy and garbage and replaced it with a more reliable resource, if so?
They're funny, this lot. They act like there's some singular globe software stored on a gold hard drive somewhere in Geneva. In reality, there are dozens of astronomical libraries, based on the same physics of course, but with slight variations in how they model things like terrain, refraction and twilight. Just like different GPS apps might give you different ETAs when you're planning a route. Daylight calculations can differ, and it means absolutely nothing. Scientists don't challenge these discrepancies because there's nothing to challenge. It's like arguing whether your drive home is going to take 42 minutes or 44 minutes. you're still going home.
Sometimes, but not usually, some other sites come up in searches like timegenie.com, but it only gives sunrise and sunset for the few bases it has, no solar noon or day length. But again, it does show when alleged 24-hour suns start and stop, if you know what dates to look for. So I urge other researchers to take my work and start expanding on it. Though here again, we see timegenie.com shows McMurdo Base having its 24-hour sun period ending Tuesday, February 18th, where there is suddenly a sunrise time and sunset time. And yet the other three sites we looked at said there was still a 24-hour sun on Tuesday, February 18th. And so now we have 3 conflicting dates instead of 2.
Here we go again. 3 websites, 3 slightly different dates for where McMurdo Station ends its 24-hour sun period. But let's zoom out for a second. They all agree that this phenomenon happens. The only debate is about a day or 2 of transition. That's exactly what you'd expect near the edge of constant daylight. The sun doesn't suddenly switch off. It dips lower and lower and lower until it finally sets. These are not contradictions. They're natural consequences of modelling a complex system. Yet conspiracy theorists treat any deviation like a fatal flaw. Ironically, this example proves that the globe works. We see continuous daylight for weeks, with predictable sunset timing that only makes sense on a rotating, tilted sphere.
Then it says on Thursday, February 20th, the sun rises at 3:41 a.m. and sets at 12:32 a.m. the next morning, making a 20-hour and 51-minute day, which is an hour and 5 minutes to an hour and 54 minutes shorter than the other 3, making 4 majorly conflicting lengths of day.
Now here they cite timegenie.com as a third source. But here's the problem with that. TimeGenie doesn't even tell you how it calculates sunrise and sunset. There's no solar elevation data, no modelling explanation, no refraction correction, nothing. Comparing that to more robust sources like timeanddate.com is like comparing a sketch to some blueprints. So the fact that its numbers differ slightly doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means you shouldn't be using timegenie.com for serious analysis. Now, they do bang on a bit more about these discrepancies, but I think we've had enough of them. And we've debunked it enough for now, haven't we? So let's move on to see what else they've got to say.
Lastly, as we'll cover later, timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info both usually, but not always, have the exact same solar noontime as each other, but the sunrise, sunset, and day lengths are always different without fail. A smoking gun in itself, as it is impossible to come up with the same solar noontime then, with those always being different from each other.
Solar noon is simply the time where the sun is at its highest point in the sky, i.e. it crosses the observer's meridian. Now that depends only on longitude and the date, and all reputable models will calculate that in the same way, because it's based on Earth's rotation and its orbit, not on atmospheric effects. So yes, 2 different websites should be reporting the same or near identical solar noon times, because that math is simple and universal. Now we've already explained that the sunrise and sunset times down in Antarctica are not as simple as that. They're modelled differently by different tools, especially near the poles where the sun skims the horizon for hours.
As Nicole Murphy and I covered in great detail in our talk on the secret sacred laws of the luminaries. The globe model seemingly can't predict jack shit accurately, if at all, in Antarctica. Could that be because we don't live on a globe? So they have to lie and fudge it to make it work and hope nobody double checks?
Look, let's be absolutely honest here. If indeed the Earth was flat and there was a giant cover-up, wouldn't you think that they'd make sure that this sort of stuff wasn't noticeable? I think it would seem even more suspicious if all those sites did match exactly, wouldn't it? I think you'll be making a video saying, oh, it's unbelievable. It's like they've all designed it that way. They're all matched exactly. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Just my 2 cents on that.
But I digress. Back to Casey's station, we find the same suspicious story. Different 24-hour sun start dates, wildly different 24-hour sun end dates. totally different length of day times on December 6th, the last agreeable date before the alleged 24-hour sun, off by as much as 44 minutes, even more wildly disagreeable length of daytimes on the first agreed date of no 24-hour sun on January 5th, this time magically off by as much as 53 minutes from each other instead of 44 going in.
Look, I don't want to be a critic, but a documentary really should hold the viewer's attention. You've made your point on this, you don't need to keep banging on about it.
Its last agreeable day of no 24-hour sun, December 6th, sunrise times are off by as much as 25 minutes from each other, just as its sunset times that same day are off from each other by as much as 23 minutes. As are its January 5th first agreed day of no more 24-hour sunrise times, all off from each other by as much as 50 minutes, yet its same alleged sunset times that day are magically only off by 24 minutes somehow.
Yep, you're going to keep banging on about it, aren't you? Let's skip on until we find something else they want to say.
I'm sorry. These are not acceptable rates of error and difference within each base for the alleged speeds their latitude lines are supposed to be rotating at on the globe model. Especially for bases like Casey, Davis, and Dumont d'Urville, which are all three allegedly out or up right on the alleged Arctic Circle 66.16 south latitude ring, which should be rotating faster at 420 miles per hour or 7 miles a minute on the globe model.
More fundamental misunderstandings of planetary physics this time. The rotational speed of Earth in miles per hour has nothing to do with when the sun rises or sets. Sunrise and sunsets are determined by the Earth's angular rotation, its tilted axis and your position on the globe, not how fast your location is flying through space. And those bases they list, they're all right near the edge of the Antarctic Circle. That's the edge of the 24-hour sun zone. Of course you're going to see slight variations here in sunset times and daylight duration between them, especially during solstice transitions. That's not evidence against the globe, it's exactly what the globe predicts.
How can Davis possibly have an hour and 46-minute sunrise time discrepancy on November 22nd? That's a discrepancy of 742 miles of sunlight range. Even the hour or more discrepancy between most of the other bases is still 420 plus miles of sunlight, or 2.5 times the length of the entire country of Denmark. That is not an acceptable rate of error.
This might be here the most numerically embarrassing moment in this documentary. The narrator sees a 1 hour and 46-minute difference in Davis Station's reported sunrise time on November the 22nd and converts that into a 742-mile sunlight discrepancy. But that's not how sunlight works. Sunrise is determined by the angle of the sun above the horizon, not by how fast the ground is spinning. Near the poles, the sun crawls across the sky at a shallow angle, and just a tiny change in modelling, like including or excluding atmospheric refraction, can shift that perceived sunrise by over an hour. So no, there's no 742-mile error here. Just someone applying equator-based maths to polar light geometry and getting wildly misleading results.
Let's stop messing around and get to the kill shot. It's time to show Jaren some latitude with attitude.
Wow, they mean business. Let's see if it's any better than the rest of the nonsense they've come up with so far.
Major discrepancies at individual bases are damning enough, but when it happens with multiple bases right next to each other, Houston, we have another huge problem. And credit, respect, and hats off to Jaren sincerely for thinking and asking the right question here. Because here he is correct. If we live on a globe, what happens in latitude stays in latitude. And here we have Davis, Zhongshan, and Druzhnaya 4, not only on nearly the same latitude, but almost the same longitude. Lucky for us, not so lucky for globies.
I think the narrator is going to wrongly assume something here, that locations at the same latitude but slightly different longitudes should have identical sunrise, sunset and day length times. But this is of course false, because sunrise and sunset times are affected by both latitude and longitude. Even small longitudinal differences matter, because the Earth rotates 15 degrees per hour of course, meaning just 1 degree of longitude is around 4 minutes of time difference. And in polar regions where the sun's path is extremely shallow to the horizon, tiny differences in both latitude and longitude can cause amplified timing differences.
Jaren's own Globy Google Earth shows from Davis Station to Zhongshan Station is only 67 miles away. You can see they are at nearly identical latitude lines, off by less than 1 degree, with Davis at 68.34 south and Zhongshan at 69.22 south.
Again, like in previous episodes, you can't read your coordinates correctly. Davis Station is at 68 degrees 34 minutes, which is more like 68.5 degrees. And Zhongshan Station is at 69 degrees 22 minutes, which is more like 69.3 degrees.
They are both also on nearly the same longitude line, only 1 degree off, with Davis at 77.58 east and Zhongshan at 76.22 east.
Again, that's basically 78 degrees and 76.3 degrees respectively, so not quite as close as you thought.
So what Jaren rightly means by what happens in latitude must happen to others on the same latitude on the globe model is that due to the alleged Earth tilt and rotation, that same latitude ring will face the sun at the same angle and same amount of time every day for every location on that same latitude ring.
Yes, but that only works if you are on exactly the same latitude. Not off by a degree, half a degree, or even quarter of a degree. The exact same.
So being only 67 miles apart on nearly identical latitude, there is no way on a globe that one of those stations could be experiencing a day of 24-hour sun without the other also experiencing it, or experiencing a brief sunrise-sunset without the other also experiencing it.
This assumption's not correct though. These bases aren't perfectly aligned. They differ by up to 0.8 degrees in latitude, which is nearly 90 kilometers, and at the edge of the 24-hour daylight zone, that's enough to shift you in or out of continuous sun. The change from a regular day-night to 24-hour sun isn't an instant snap. It's a gradual transition, where changes in latitude and terrain and atmospheric conditions can make a difference. That's not a glitch in the globe model. That's exactly what a globe predicts.
And since they are just less than 1 degree apart in south latitude, when you take the middle latitude between them, which is roughly 68.8 east latitude, the Earth rotation speed, or speed the sun would travel as you rotate under it, is 376 miles per hour, or 6.26 miles per minute. Which means since they are only 67 miles apart from each other, and the sun is moving at 6.26 miles per minute along the east-west latitude ring between them, it should take just under 11 minutes between both of their sunrise and sunset times, meaning their sunrise and sunset times can't be off by more than 11 minutes from each other.
This might be one of the biggest mathematical blunders in the entirety of the documentary. The narrator claims that because these two Antarctic stations are only 67 miles apart, their sunrise and sunset times and day lengths can't differ by more than 11 minutes on the globe. But this shows a complete misunderstanding of how the sun's motion works on a globe. They always say, the flat earthers, that they think they know the model better than us, but they don't. The sun's apparent motion is angular. It moves 15 degrees per hour for everyone. Everywhere. Surface speed in miles per hour doesn't control when or how long the sun is visible for. As we've already discussed, in those polar regions, the boundary between 24-hour sunlight and day-night cycles is incredibly sensitive to tiny latitudinal changes. A station just barely inside the 24-hour sunlight zone will experience 24 hours of sun. whereas a station slightly north of that will see the sun slightly dip below the horizon, even if they're only 50 or 60 miles apart. Talk about being confused. Wowzers.
Not if we live on a globe like Jaron surmises. It also means both their length of days when there is sunrise and sunset can't be off from each other by more than that either, since they are on almost the same latitude and longitude.
The claim here is a weird one, that two stations on similar latitude and longitudes can't have different day lengths on the globe. But that's obviously false, especially near the Antarctic Circle. This binary boundary doesn't care that you're only 50 or 60 miles apart.
While Davis Base was one of the ones we were fortunate enough to have 3 different references for to compare, Zhongzhen Station was only shown on dateandtime.info. There was strangely no information available for them on timeanddate.com or sunrise.maplogs.com. But as I said, this seems to be the pattern when bases are close together, like someone doesn't want us comparing.
Well, how about I compare for you? Davis Station on timeanddate.info says that the 24-hour sun should start on November the 23rd this year. The NOAA website says November the 24th. And let's move on to Zhongzhen Station then. Dateandtime.info says that the 24-hour sun starts on the 19th of November. The NOAA website says the 21st of November. Now, we've already talked about how different websites use different modelling and how they might define a 24-hour sun differently. And so this is not a problem for me. What matters is the overall pattern. Zhongshan sees 24-hour sun earlier than Davis Station, which matches their positions on the globe exactly. The so-called discrepancies are tiny modelling variations, not a breakdown of the globe model.
And here's why. There is Zhongzhen Station, 63 miles from Davis. Dateandtime.info says Zhongzhen's period of 24-hour sun starts November 19th. Yet the same website says Davis, 63 miles away, doesn't have a 24-hour sun until November 23rd, 4 days later. As Jaron said, Zhongzhen cannot be having 4 days of 24-hour sun when Davis is not, and Davis cannot be having 4 days of dusk sunset when Zhongzhen is not, if we live on a globe.
Except they can, because again, they are not on the exact same latitude or longitude. Simple as that. Again, your expectations are incorrect.
See for yourself right off the website, dateandtime.info, sunrise and sunset calendar. There's Davis, November 2024. There's Zhongzhen, November 2024. There's Zhongshan, showing itself having an alleged 24-hour sun starting Tuesday, November 19th, and yet Davis, only 67 miles away on the same latitude, is reporting their midnight sun doesn't start until 4 days later on Saturday, November 23rd, even though that's impossible.
And that is perfectly plausible on the globe. If you look at the sunrise and sunset times for Davis stations on November the 19th, you can see it's already having a 22-hour day. So it's very close to being 24 hours. And as we said, due to the small latitudinal differences, totally acceptable on a globe.
And Davis is even showing very specific sunrise and sunset times for the 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd, when there shouldn't be any.
Well, that tells me then that there's clearly a difference because of the latitudinal differences.
In fact, Davis is also showing very specific solar noon times and lengths of day for the 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd, when Zhongshan claims there's a 24-hour sun.
Davis and Zhongshan are nearly 1 degree apart in latitude, as we've already seen. And near the Antarctic Circle, that slight difference is the line between brief sunsets and 24 hours of daylight.
Sunrise.maplogs says Davis's alleged 24-hour sun doesn't even start until November 24th. That's 5 days later than Zhongshan's alleged 19th start. And timeanddate.com says Davis's alleged 24-hour sun starts November 25th, 6 days later than Zhongshan's. Impossible. Then in January 2025, Zhongshan is claimed to be having a 24-hour sun all the way until Thursday, January 23rd, according to dateandtime.info. Yet once again, the same website is showing Davis in January 2025 only having an alleged 24-hour sun until Sunday, January 19th, while Zhongshan claims to still be having one for 4 more days until the 23rd. Yet Davis is showing very detailed sunrise and sunset times, solar noon times, length of days for the 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd.
Look, I'm not being funny, but you seem to be pressing this quite strongly, without realising that that small difference in latitude matters. Now, if these two stations were almost on the exact same latitude, say within 0.1 of a degree, then yes, you might have a point. But they're not. You're hanging your hat on this argument, even though it's a very poor one.
So how is Zhongshan having a 24-hour sun for those same days? And that means, according to dateandtime.info, Zhongshan has a combined 8 more days of 24-hour sun than Davis, 67 miles away on the same latitude. Impossible.
It's not impossible because you say so, you know. Honestly, the Dunning-Kruger effect is here for all to see on this one.
And once again, the possibility of Zhongshan having an alleged 24-hour sun all the way until January 23rd is not supported by or possible, with both sunrise.maplogs and timeanddate.com claiming Davis's alleged 24-hour sun ended already 5 days earlier on January 18th. So this impossibility alone proves either we can't and don't live on a globe, or these people are lying about everything. But why lie if we really live on a ball?
These are not the only two scenarios, there is a third. You are misunderstanding how these websites work and your expectations are not correct. But I guess you didn't think about that option, right?
Anyway, since they so wildly disagree on when the alleged 24-hour sun period even starts, we have to go back to the first day they both agree there wasn't one to see if their sunrise and sunset times, as well as the length of that day, are all within those 11 minutes of each other and no longer. That we discussed has to happen if we live on a ball earlier. In this case, that date is Monday, November 18th, the day before Zhongshan claims their 24-hour sun starts. So I'll put Zhongshan in light blue. Then we'll find that same date for Davis in November, Monday, November 18th, which I'll put in light green. And here they are already busted again for a second time with multiple impossibilities. As my brother Jaron rightly said, everything on the same latitude ring must have the exact same length of day. Davis cannot have a 21-hour, 35-minute, and 57-second long day, while Zhongshan has a 22-hour, 58-minute, and 43-second long day. 1 hour and 23 minutes longer than Davis. That's impossible.
Okay, once more, and slowly. Davis and Zhongshan are nearly 0.8 degrees apart in latitude. That's nearly 90 kilometers. And in the polar regions, that difference is enough to shift day length by well over an hour. That observed difference that you mentioned, the 1 hour 23 minutes, is exactly what we'd expect on a rotating, tilted globe. It's not only possible on a globe, it's required by it. My oh my, I thought he was trying to debunk the globe, not prove it.
When you triangulate Davis's latitude line with Zhongshan's latitude line, there is only a 32-mile difference between them. At 6.26 miles per minute into 32 miles closer to the alleged sun path, the best advantage it could give Zhongshan is an extra 5 minutes and maybe a bit of daytime, not 1 hour and 23 minutes. 1 hour and 23 minutes of extra daytime, or 83 minutes, times the sun traveling at 6.26 miles per minute means somehow the sun is magically still shining light on Zhongshan for an entire 519.6 more miles away than it can shine on Davis, even though Davis is only 67 miles away from Zhongshan.
No surprise that you got the distances wrong between the latitudes there. That's your error 1. And error number 2 you've already made already. Day length isn't determined by how fast the surface moves in miles per hour. It's determined by the angle of the Earth's axis, which is the tilt towards the sun, and the geometry of a sphere. Dear oh dear, this is just one mistake after another on this video, isn't it?
Meaning what time the sun is closest to you that day, they are 67 miles apart from each other. Remember, the sun is allegedly traveling overhead due to Earth rotation at 6.26 miles per minute. The sun should take 10.7 minutes to travel between them, not 6.
The key factor here is longitude difference, not surface distance difference. If those two bases are, say, 1.5 degrees apart in longitude, then their solar noons will differ by, guess what, 6 minutes. Because of course Earth rotates 15 degrees per hour, or 1 degree every 4 minutes. So let's check on that, shall we? Davis Station is at 77.9 degrees east, and Zhongshan is at 76.4 degrees east. Exactly 1.5 degrees. What a surprise. Once again, the narrator has mixed up rotational surface speed in miles per hour with the apparent motion of the sun across the sky. These are of course completely different things.
But hell, let's tack on the 5 minutes latitude triangulation and throw them a bone. Because solar noon is the dead middle of when you see the sun rise versus set, give or take 10 to 15 minutes, depending on where you are and what time of year. So you cannot have your solar noon 6 minutes apart from each other if your day length is off by 1 hour and 23 minutes. Your solar noon should be off by that halved, 41.5 minutes. 6 minutes is impossible.
Well, no, it's not, because solar noon, the time where the sun is the highest in the sky, is controlled by longitude. It doesn't care what your sunrise or sunset times are. You can have two places with identical solar noon times, but totally different daylight lengths, simply because one may be closer to a pole than another one. The length of the day, so how many hours the sun is above the horizon, is controlled by your distance from the equator and the tilt of Earth. That's why summer in Scotland has longer days than summer in Spain, even if solar noon is at roughly the same time.
Their sunrise time is off by a margin of 35 minutes from each other, and their sunset time is off by 48 minutes. They are both only 67 miles apart from each other on nearly the same east-west latitude circle and longitude the sun would pass along at 6.26 miles per minute. Their sunrises and their sunsets have to be within 10.7 minutes of each other.
If we base it off your shoddy maths and misunderstanding of physics, which of course we don't.
Or we don't live on a globe. I'd even give them an extra 5 minutes for latitude and make it 15.7 minutes, but it can't be 35 minutes or 48 minutes. That again is impossible.
As we've said in previous episodes, sunrise and sunset times are overwhelmingly influenced by latitude. Even tiny shifts north or south can massively change how long the sun is above the horizon. So even though these bases are relatively close together in distance, they are not close together in solar behaviour, because the curve of the Earth and the tilt of the axis means the sun interacts with each location's horizon differently. Again, they are not on the exact same latitude.
I've now got the bases orientated with north up. At 6.26 miles per minute, in 35 minutes, the orange line, the sun would have already traveled way past Davis Base, 219.1 miles across the shared east-west latitude line. And in 48 minutes, the sun would have already traveled 300.48 miles past Davis, not 67 miles.
Once again, the 6.26 miles per minute number is completely irrelevant. That's how fast the surface is moving relative to Earth's axis, not how fast the sun is travelling across the sky as we observe it. That, as we have already stated, is 15 degrees per hour.
For the sun to take 48 minutes to travel across the 67 miles between the two bases at that latitude, the Earth would have to almost stop spinning down to 1.39 miles per minute from 376 miles per hour down to 83.7 miles per hour. Everyone would be dead.
Yes, your misunderstanding of how anything works when it comes to the physics of Earth science is quite simply astounding.
Yeah, Steve, but that's just the same website. How does Zongshan compare to timeanddate.com's November 18th times for Davis Space? Good question. I love astute minds, so let's see together.
He basically says the same thing here over and over, which we've already debunked. And his misunderstandings are now tiring, to be honest. He does move on though to talk a bit about the final experiment itself.
My opinion is that he and Austin are not shills, but they did not fake anything and really saw what they believed to be a 24-hour sun in Union Glacier. As Nicole Murphy and I exhaustively covered for 3 hours in the same talk I have been hinting and urging you to go watch, our opinion is that they really could have seen what would appear to be a 24-hour sun in Union Glacier at a purposely chosen time of year and position on the ice wall on the real metaphysical flat Earth.
Oh dear. So they accept that the final experiment saw the 24-hour sun, but now they've constructed a metaphysical flat Earth to try and explain it. The mind boggles, doesn't it?
Quite different from the current accepted but incorrect Jesuit Newtonian physics-based flat Earth model, incorrectly depicting the misunderstood luminary paths above our head.
So you disagree then with pretty much all other flat earthers? Interesting. Maybe we need to have a look at this metaphysical model.
My buddy Dave Weiss and Marty Leeds have good evidence and reason to believe the 24-hour sun they all saw was modern, holographic technological fakery.
They've got no evidence at all. I've seen it. They were just spitballing.
And Austin and Jaron were just unwitting dupes. Both opinions are just our opinions, speculation and conjecture.
In other words, you've got no proof, and neither does David Weiss or Marty Leeds.
But what I'm showing you in this film is that the official data I'm presenting here is solid proof that this map and model is too impossible to be actual reality.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, my friend, but all it is proof of is your misunderstanding of physics, and sunrises, and sunsets, and day lengths, and solar noon, and pretty much data in general. Your expectations are not correct. That's the real issue here.
Or at least just one of the 46 bases in the alleged 24-hour sun zone would match up with at least itself and or another one at least once. But none of them do, ever.
Which we've discussed at length in episodes 1 and 2.
We need to look at and understand solar noon versus clock noon together to understand how damning this evidence is. We'll go to Miami on the southern tip of Florida on the June 21st summer solstice, since it's close to the Tropic of Cancer, where the sun is circling around on June 21st on both the globe and flat Earth map. There's the Tropic of Cancer cutting right under Miami. Solar noon just means as the sun comes around the latitude ring that day, in this case on the Tropic of Cancer on June 21st, what time is it on the clock when the sun is at its closest point to you, the observer in Miami?
Yes, well, you could have just said that solar noon is the time of day where the sun reaches its highest point in the sky at any given location. The viewers would have actually understood that.
Here on the flat Earth map, the Tropic of Cancer is the little green ring inside the larger blue and red rings. So it's the same. As the sun comes around the Tropic of Cancer latitude ring on June 21st, what time is it on the clock when the sun is closest to you before going farther away from you?
So now you go back to the 24-hour map that is impossible due to the fact that the final experiment saw the 24-hour sun in Antarctica, which you yourself admitted was seen. That seems a bit weird.
It has nothing to do with what time your clock says it is when the sun is closest to you that day. So for example, we can see Marco Island is roughly 91 miles slightly northwest of Miami, maybe 70 miles if we start at West Miami, but whatever. So the sun always rises in the east and will obviously reach Miami slightly before it reaches Marco Island. So we can see for Miami, their solar noon on the June 21st solstice, or just the time on the clock the sun is closest to Miami before going away from Miami, is 1:22 in the afternoon, an hour and 22 minutes after their clock said it was clock noon.
This is, of course, a well-understood concept. Interesting to see where he's going to go with this.
While for Marco Island, 91 miles west of Miami that same day, their solar noon point, where the sun is closest to Marco Island before it starts going away from Marco Island, is 1:28 in the afternoon on the clock, 6 minutes later than Miami's solar noon.
6 minutes, nice. So with a rotational rate of 15 degrees per hour, that means these two places should be around 1.5 degrees apart in longitude. I checked, and they are. What a surprise.
That's simply because it took the sun 6 more minutes to get from Miami to Marco Island on its east to west path during the day.
There are some times in your life where you can be extremely chuffed with yourself, and this is one of those times. Because I've managed to catch something here where they have actually monumentally debunked themselves. Earlier on in the documentary, they told us that two bases in Antarctica were 67 miles apart and had a 6-minute solar noon difference. And they said that this was impossible on the globe because the ground speed there is only 6.26 miles per minute. They were thinking the time difference should be more like 10 or 11 minutes, based on how long the surface takes to rotate that distance. But then, just then, they show us Miami and Marco Island, around 90 miles apart, and surprise, surprise, there's also a 6-minute difference between their solar noon times. And here's the thing, the rotational ground speed in Miami is double that of Antarctica. So by their logic, how can both places, with totally different surface speeds, remember, have the same 6-minute difference in solar noon? The answer is of course simple, because it's got nothing to do with ground speed in miles per hour. It's entirely about longitude and Earth's rotation. As we've said, the Earth rotates 15 degrees per hour, which is around 1 degree per 4 minutes. That's true whether you're standing at the equator in Miami or Antarctica. And if you actually look at the maps, the longitude difference between the two bases in Antarctica that he was talking about earlier in the documentary and Miami and Marco Island is pretty much 1.5 degrees in longitude. That's why the solar noon times differ by 6 minutes in both cases. That is exactly how the globe works. Perfect and predictable. Wow, that is one of the most satisfying cell phones we've ever had on this channel. Quite splendid indeed.
And for those who want to shut up about VapeGate and actually do something useful by checking other apps and sites and expound on my legwork here, you need to look at solar noons. Even though timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info can't even agree on what date the alleged 24-hour sun starts or ends, or how many days of the alleged 24-hour sun each has at any of these bases, when you check the first day before or the first day after they both agree there even is no 24-hour sun, both almost always have the exact same solar noon.
So after being highly suspect when it came to the differences in the two sites between the 24-hour day lengths, you then admit that these same two sites almost always agree when it comes to solar noon. If these websites are constantly showing the same solar noon times, that's a sign that their underlying models of Earth's rotation are correct and consistent. We've already looked at why these different websites could have different times regarding the day length around the 24-hour sun, how they define sunrise and sunset, for example, precision rounding, or possibly small differences in coordinates or elevation profiles. But solar noon is calculated from astronomical mechanics. It's a pure geometric event. It happens when the sun crosses your local meridian, an imaginary line running from true south to true north. And it happens with clockwork precision. There's no grey areas with solar noon. It just is.
Which means both websites have to know exactly where each of these bases are and what clock time the sun is closest to each base to agree on that. So they have to also have the exact same sunrise and sunset times and length of days for each base. Yet they never do, not even once.
Again, solar noon is a clean, angular event. The sun is at its highest point in the sky when it crosses your local meridian. It's based purely on longitude and Earth's rotation. Easy to calculate, easy to agree on. But as we've already discussed, sunrise and sunsets, they're a bit more fuzzy. If anything, the agreement on solar noons across those platforms proves that the Earth is rotating steadily and predictably. The sunrise and sunset differences? That's just different ways of defining when the day begins or ends.
See for yourself, marked in orange, Casey, Dumont d'Urville, Mawson, Rothera Research Station, San Martin and Davis, and Showa, not Siowa like the map, all have the exact same solar noons for both websites. Also Mario Zucchelli, Concordia, and Dome Fuji, also marked in orange. Again, these are just for the first date. They both at least agreed there wasn't a 24-hour sun yet at these bases, like October 30th, 29th, 22nd, etc.
Wow, when you make a point, you really like to drive it home, don't you? This documentary could have been half the length that it is.
And yet, despite the exact same precise solar noon times as each other, Casey's sunrise time is off by 35 minutes from each other, sunset by 19 minutes, day length by 44 minutes, Dumont off by 26 minutes, 18 minutes, and 43 minutes, Mawson off by 15 minutes, 13 minutes, and 34 minutes.
Oh my word, you're actually going to go through all of them. Let's skip past this bit, shall we?
What is also interesting is that despite getting the exact same solar noon times right together for 10 of the bases they both had statistics for, they didn't get them right at all for 6 of the bases. Dumont d'Urville is off by an hour and 2 minutes. That's a typo error on my part. Date and time should be 11:44:26 a.m., not p.m. Neumeyer 3 is off by an hour. Mizuho Cohen by 17 minutes, twice the time it takes the sun to get from Miami to Marco Island. Vostok is off by an hour. Belgrano 3 is off by 8 hours. What? Another major smoking gun we'll get to shortly. And Troll Station is off by 3 hours.
Okay, so now he's pointing out discrepancies in solar noons. What time zones were these times given in? Were they using UTC, local station time? Was daylight saving at play? Some of these Antarctic stations don't even use their actual geographic time zone. They occupy within the time zone of their home country, or in some cases, just UTC. For example, with that 8-hour discrepancy at Belgrano 2 station, I'm willing to bet that he compared a UTC time at one site with a local time from another. That's not a conspiracy, it's just bad research.
As we already covered, what happens in latitude stays in latitude. Troll Station is nearly on the same latitude line as Senai 4, allegedly, while Conan Station is allegedly on our inner southern latitude ring, closer to the alleged South Pole. Get this in your mind. On the globe model, because of the alleged tilt of the Earth, in the months between September through March, the closer you are to the alleged South Pole or dead bottom of the alleged globe, you should be having longer date periods of alleged 24-hour sun. Then the length of days you have just before and after that period should be longer than those bases farther north or up the globe towards the equator and north of the South Pole, and the sunrise and sunset time should be earlier and later from solar noon on the same longitude, since the day lengths should be longer.
Now, the narrator tells us here that between September and March, or the Southern Hemisphere summer, the closer you are to the South Pole, the longer your period of 24-hour sun should be. And that's absolutely true on the globe. That's how the tilt of the Earth works. And then they say, so stations closer to the South Pole should have earlier sunrises and later sunsets than those further north on the same longitude. And this is where the wheels come off, because sunrise and sunset aren't just affected by day length. They're also affected by how the sun moves across the sky at different latitudes. That's why the globe model uses latitude and solar declination to calculate the sun's exact path at any given time. It's not just about being further south. It's about how the angle of the Earth's tilt interacts with your position.
If this is not the case, which you'll see it is not, then we cannot live on a globe with an Antarctic continent. Period. Let's look at Sanae 4, the most northern base of these three, which should have the shortest length of daylight in these months, since the closer you are to the South Pole in the winter, the longer your daylight should be, versus Conan Station, which should have the longest length of day, and Troll Station between them, which should be in the middle of the two. These bases are very close to each other. Conan Station is allegedly only 236 miles south of Sanae 4 and just 210 miles south of Troll Station. Troll Station is only allegedly 119 miles east of Sanae 4 and just a meager 26 miles south of latitude from Sanae 4, making them almost identical in latitude. And what happens in latitude, Jaron, stays in latitude.
Okay, so Sanae 4 station is on 71.67 degrees south, Troll Station 72.01 degrees south, and Conan Station is pretty much bang on 75 degrees south. Very happy with that. Let's see what happens next.
The first ridiculous thing to notice is that despite Troll Station being only 26 miles south of Sanae 4 in latitude, dateandtime.info says Troll Station somehow has 2 more days of 24-hour sun ending February 2nd than Sanae 4, just 26 miles north, ending 2 days earlier on January 31st.
Yes, and when you're that far south, 26 miles can make a lot of difference. But crucially, and I bet you didn't look this up, these bases are on wildly different elevations. Sanae 4 is at 797 metres above sea level, and Troll Station 1,349 metres above sea level. That is why there's a difference here.
So here's how we know they are lying. When we go back to Tuesday, October 29th, the last date that dateandtime.info agrees all 3 bases did not have a 24-hour sun, the length of days almost looks fine. Sanae 4, the most northerly away from the alleged South Pole, should have the shortest length of day, and it does. 19 hours, 4 minutes, and 35 seconds. Troll Station, just 26 miles south, should have a slightly longer day than Sanae 4, and it does. 19 hours, 16 minutes, and 23 seconds, about 12 minutes longer. And Conan Station should have the longest day, and it does. 22 hours, 45 minutes, and 5 seconds.
Well, what's the problem then? It matches.
But hang on. Conan Base is allegedly only 210 measly miles south of Troll Station, and it is having a 3.5 hour longer daylight on October 29th than Troll Station. Sure, Steve, you obviously don't get globe physics.
Well, I don't want to say it, but if the shoe fits.
Okay, but then explain this. Troll Station is allegedly on the 72nd south latitude ring, just 119 miles east of Sanae 4 on nearly the exact same latitude ring, just 26 miles south of Sanae 4, meaning the sun should be moving 321.5 miles per hour between them, or reaching Troll Station 22.24 minutes before it reaches Sanae 4 on October 29th for sunrise, and it should be setting 22.24 minutes before San 4 for sunset.
The next thing you're about to say is now irrelevant, because you are yet again using Earth's linear speed relative to its axis to explain sun movement. Totally incorrect. On a rotating globe, everything rotates at the same angular speed, 15 degrees per hour. I'm sure I've said that in every past episode of this documentary debunking. It's not about how fast your location spins in miles per hour.
So how the hell is Troll Station getting an alleged 10:55 p.m. sunrise compared to San 4's 5:22 a.m. sunrise? 5.5 hours later, when it should be only 22 minutes later? And how in the hell is Troll Station getting its sunset that day at 6:11 p.m. when San 4 is getting its sunset at 12:27 a.m. the next morning, getting 6 hours and 16 minutes more evening sun time than Troll Station, when it should be setting 22 minutes later than Troll, not 6 hours after?
Remember though, that there's a 552 metre difference in elevation between these two stations. And at latitudes above 70 degrees south, that's a big deal. Why? Because in late October, the sun is hugging the horizon, rising and setting at incredibly shallow angles, which means the higher you are, the further you can see to the horizon. This means the sun becomes visible sooner at sunrise and later at sunset. In short, elevation extends daylight, and the effect is amplified the closer you get to the poles.
An alleged Earth rotating at 321.5 miles per hour at their alleged 72 south latitude would put the sunset distance 3,822 miles west of both bases over that 6 hours and 15 minutes different, not the 119 miles between them required for the globe model to be nonfiction. And in fact, since both bases are allegedly only 119 miles apart, taking 22 minutes for the sun to travel between them, how is Troll Station getting a solar noontime of 8:33 a.m. on October 29th, and San 4 getting their solar noon at 2:54 p.m., 6 hours and 21 minutes later instead of 22 minutes later, when they are on nearly the exact same latitude line by only 26 miles difference? Impossible on a globe.
This seems like a massive gotcha for the team, but let me explain what's going on. Troll Station at that time of year uses the time zone UTC. At the same time of year, San 4 uses UTC +2. Now, if we use the NOAA website, the solar noon on October the 29th last year is 11:33 a.m. For San 4, the solar noon on the same day is 1:54 p.m. A 2-hour, 21-minute difference. 2 hours due to the time zone difference, and 21 minutes due to the longitudinal difference. And that longitudinal difference is just over 5 degrees, which, if you take the rotation of Earth into account, should be 21 minutes. I do not know what dateandtime.info was saying, but I know which website I trust more.
The Earth would have had to almost stop that day and kill everyone on it with 1,000-mile-an-hour tsunamis, or they are lying about these base locations and times because they are really scattered along an ice wall and not where and when they claim they are located on their fake globe model.
And I think that's a very good place to wrap up proceedings for today, don't you? I don't think they're ever going to get over the linear speed at the Earth's surface thing, are they?
Let's look at Maitri Station, owned by India. It is 331 miles east of San 4 Station. As you can see, they too are nearly on the exact same latitude ring, off by 1 degree. Do you want me to say it, or do you want to? Jaron, what happens in latitude stays in latitude.
Yes, but they aren't the exact same latitude, are they? They are 1 degree apart, which makes a massive difference.
As you can see, Maitri Station is allegedly at 70.45 degrees south latitude.
Still getting coordinates wrong, I see. 70 degrees 45 minutes is 70.75 degrees.
Just outside or north of San 4 Station, allegedly at 71.4 degrees south latitude.
That's 71.67 degrees south.
So it's very easy for us to take the average between them, which would be roughly 70.9 degrees south latitude.
And this is why knowing your coordinates matters, because the average of those two stations is actually 71.21 degrees, not 70.9. But all of that is irrelevant because of the next sentence he's about to say,
giving us an alleged west to east Earth rotation speed of 340.4 miles per hour. From here, we can go again to Tuesday, October 29th, the last day any of these four bases agree there was no 24-hour sun yet, and make some general calculations that must apply if we live on a spinning globe, and check my E-tree against Sanae 4 to see if this lines up or fails miserably like all of the others. Spoiler alert.
It's hilarious how he boldly declares he can take the average latitude of these two stations and from that calculate the Earth's rotation speed at that latitude. Why? Because reasons, I guess. Look, we've already gone over this multiple times across multiple episodes. You cannot use the Earth's linear surface speed to talk about the sun's movement across the sky. It's just nonsensical.
Since my E-tree is about 331 miles east of Sanae 4, the sun must rise there first as the alleged globe spins around, and since the alleged globe is spinning at 340.4 miles per hour on that latitude between them, we should see Sanae 4's sunrise time just under an hour after my E-tree, 50-some minutes later. We should also see my E-tree's solar noon time roughly 50-some minutes before Sanae 4's, just like we saw with Miami and Marco Island. We should see my E-tree's sunset time also happen 50-some minutes before Sanae 4's sunset. And lastly, their length of day should be pretty close to each other, since they are only 1 degree apart of latitude, and Sanae 4 should have a slightly longer day length than my E-tree, even if only by a few minutes or so, since it is allegedly closer to the South Pole and Earth tilt, putting it more towards the sun, even if ever slightly.
Everything he's describing here does happen and is precisely what we'd expect on the globe. His timings are a bit off, but essentially my E-tree will have a sunrise first and a slightly shorter day length. Not really sure where he's going with this.
And here's an even bigger elephant in the room. My E-tree station is only 1 degree north of latitude, or literally only 60.9 miles further away from the sun than Sanae 4. So how can their alleged 24-hour sun period start 3 whole days later at my E-tree station on November 13th, after Sanae 4 allegedly gets a 24-hour sun 3 days earlier already on November 10th? And how can my E-tree station's alleged 24-hour sun end January 28th, 3 to 4 days earlier than Sanae 4? That's a total difference of Sanae 4 getting 6 to 7 more days of 24-hour sun than my E-tree station, despite only being 60 miles south of it. Give me a break.
Let's remember, the Antarctic Circle is the line of latitude around 66 degrees south, where you start to get at least 1 day of 24-hour sun. And the further south you go from there, the longer your stretch of midnight sun becomes, symmetrically centered on the December solstice. So yes, even just 1 degree closer to the South Pole buys you a few more days. That's why the Amundsen Scott station on the exact South Pole gets 6 months of 24-hour sun. And that is exactly because of the axial tilt of a spherical planet.
But I digress. So remember, their solar noon, day length, sunrise and sunset times should be off from each other by about 50 plus some minutes due to the sun's alleged east-west latitude speed of 340.4 miles per hour between their close 331-mile proximity.
His logic is based on one number. 331 miles equals 50 minutes difference. And he's trying to apply that to every solar event. But reality is far more complex than that. And when you actually checked the observed data, you'll see that my E-tree's sunrise is slightly earlier, the solar noon is earlier, and the day length is slightly shorter. In other words, everything lines up with the globe.
So here is Sane 4 in yellow for Tuesday, October 29th, and here is Maitri in the pink for the same day. The solar noons look good. Maitri's is 58 minutes before Sane 4, in the 50-plus some minutes range we predicted. But Maitri's alleged day length is only 30 minutes shorter than Sane 4, yet their sunrise is only 43 minutes earlier than Sane 4, despite solar noons being 58 minutes apart. And Maitri's sunset is 1 hour and 13 minutes before Sane 4, with the sun allegedly traveling at 340.4 miles per hour or 5.67 miles per minute. Their 60.9 mile latitude difference is only 10.7 minutes difference, not a 30-minute day length difference or 30-minute difference between sunrise and sunset times.
Day length, sunrise and sunset times aren't just shifted copies of each other. They're influenced by the tilt of the Earth's axis, the elliptical shape of Earth's orbit, latitude, and atmospheric refraction, which can delay sunset and bring sunrise further forward by few minutes.
By the way, these are even worse when we look at Sane 4 and Troll Station again on nearly the exact same latitude by just 26 miles. When we go to Sunday, February 2nd, the first day they at least both agree they are finally finished with their alleged 24-hour sun period. You can see Troll Station still claims to be having a 24-hour sun February 1st, while Sane 4 on the same latitude is pretty certain they had a 22-hour, 37-minute, and exactly 1 second day length on February 1st. Or 1 hour and 23 minutes of no visible sun in the sky.
Remember what I said in the last video. Sane 4 station is at 797 metres above sea level, and Troll Station 1,349 metres. That is why Troll Station has a 24-hour sun on the 1st of February, and Sane 4 doesn't. I bet he didn't look at the elevations, did he?
But it gets worse. How can you be 119 miles apart on the same east-west latitude on February 2nd, and Troll Station claims they had a 22-hour, 43-minute day, and Sane 4 claims a 22-hour and 2-minute day, 41 minutes less? Then Troll has a solar noon at 9:03 a.m., and Sane's at 6 hours and 22 minutes later at 3:25 in the afternoon, despite being only 113 miles west on the same latitude.
When you're higher up, your local horizon drops, which means you can see the sun for longer, especially near the poles, where the sun skims the edge of the sky for hours. That added elevation gives Troll Station a wider sky view, letting it hang on to the sun a little bit longer at either end of the day. And in polar regions, those bits add up to dozens of minutes. And we've already talked about this before. The solar noon times that you have do not match those on the NOAA website. So I think you're wrong, my friend.
It took the sun 6 hours to go 113 miles at 320 miles per hour? Okie dokie, sounds legit. Then Troll has a 9:42 p.m. sunrise versus a 4:24 a.m. sunrise 6 hours and 42 minutes later, 113 miles west on the same latitude. And Troll has an 8:25 p.m. sunset, and Sane 4 6 hours later at 2:25 a.m. That's how long it takes the sun to go around a quarter of the entire Earth at the equator.
The problem is, as we've already seen, the website's time zone data is based on arbitrary decisions made by the research stations themselves, not celestial geometry. In Antarctica, time zones are not a mess. There's no natural division like we have on other continents. Different bases just pick whatever time zone is convenient. That is why there's such a difference here. Now add that to the elevation issues and how different websites class sunrise and sunsets, and there's no wonder why they're out so much.
Could that be because that's exactly how far apart these bases really are from each other, and how long it takes the apparent sun to traverse them around the Tropic of Capricorn?
Well, no, because they're only around 5 degrees apart in longitude. Even on that flat Earth map, you've placed them 90 degrees apart.
In fact, even this area here, just off the tip of South America, is extremely telling and interesting to look at. Because funny enough, right here where this arm jets out on the flat Earth map ice wall, where the ice comes out to almost meet the latitude ring at the bottom of South America, is an identical match for what we call the Antarctic Peninsula on the globe scam map, which just happens to be right where the globe claims are the only bases on Antarctica that do not experience an alleged period of 24-hour sun, here circled in red. Which is interesting because they all seem hell-bent on crowding the tip and west side with bases, or the north top side from this view, but then nobody builds a single base on this entire Gulf Bay coastline, all the way around here on the other side until they get over to Belgrano 2, Haley, etc., and then start packing them again next to each other. All of this, nothing, and then suddenly bases. Why not a single base on all of this expanse of coastline?
Most Antarctic bases are placed where access is easiest. And guess what? The tip of South America is the closest landmass to Antarctica. It's a much shorter journey from, say, that of Johannesburg or Perth in Australia. You use less fuel, you need fewer icebreakers, and less ways to die en route. It's not crowding, it's called being practical. That Gulf Bay coastline that he's puzzled about is known as the Weddell Sea region. It's infamous for thick pack ice, even in the summer, harsh winds and unstable weather, as well as ice shelves and inaccessible coastlines. You want to build a permanent base there? Good luck. You'll need 10 times the budget, effort and risk.
Could it be because the rest of the bases are on the ice wall, not the peninsula? Is that the big secret they are hiding with all of these fake times and locations? They are studying the ice wall. That's the Antarctic Treaty. And so there are no bases here until Belgrano, because Belgrano 2 is exactly where that peninsula ends and meets back up with the ice wall. Right there.
That Antarctic peninsula is narrow and accessible and comparatively temperate, so why not put bases there? The Weddell coastline is dangerous and frozen and scientifically boring by comparison, so you're gonna have fewer bases. It really is as simple as that, I'm afraid.
Nicole Murphy and I covered in detail for over an hour in our talk on the secret sacred laws of the luminaries and the 24-hour Antarctic sun explained several ways how a cold, apparent but not real 24-hour circling sun could absolutely appear at a certain Goldilocks sweet spot zone along the entire near inner ice wall, not too close to the farthest outer edge of the wall and not too far in on the giant ice peninsula, but right where all of these bases are on the coastline.
Right, so let me get this straight. They're trying to explain away the 24-hour sun in Antarctica by suggesting that it's just an illusion. A cold, not really there pretend sun that only appears to circle in a special magical sweet spot somewhere near the ice wall. And conveniently, that's where all the bases are. Okay. Sounds legit. The thing is, on a flat Earth, that simply can't happen. The sun would never fully circle your view. It would always appear to move in an arc and vanish. You can't explain that continuous daylight, can you? Without throwing in some made-up optics and undefined mystical forces.
Claiming to have real, apparent 24-hour sun phenomenon some of the year. We expected the Globers to ignore it, but the silence from the flat Earth community has been deafening.
Why do they always use me?
Where you at, Jaron and Austin? You asked for explanations, we gave them in detail. As for the alleged final experiment, which needs to be strictly controlled of all variables to even call it an experiment and not just weekend at Bernie's igloo,
but the final experiment has been done, and it can be done again with proper controls. You set up in the right location below the Arctic Circle at the right time of year during the summer solstice and film continuously. That's it. Simple, elegant, devastating. Because if you stand there and see the sun circling in the sky without setting, then congratulations, you've just proved that the Earth isn't flat. Game over. And that's the problem for flat earthers. They don't want the experiment to be done correctly, because when it is, it shreds their model apart. They complain that it has to be strictly controlled to count as an experiment, as if that's a bad thing, but that's what science is. You should eliminate variables. You should use precision. Otherwise, what's the point?
Okay, 6 people were told they were dropped here at one base, Union Glacier, conveniently missing from online sunrise, sunset, and 24-hour sun websites. To my knowledge, they did no type of control to prove they weren't actually dropped here in what we contend is a possible 24-hour sun sweet spot. As light is nothing more than a sound wave vibrating in the ether, the source of that sound wave can be non-local to Union Glacier.
The absolute most ridiculous thing you've ever said in this whole documentary. Light is nothing more than a sound wave vibrating in the ether. Evidence for this claim? No? Or is this just feelings, I guess? Dear oh dear.
Again, Jaron, not Austin, is also using the either-or logical fallacy to draw a fallacious conclusion of opinion, not based in actual fact, which is not how scientific experiments and sound logical reasoning work. He saw what he thought was a 24-hour space fireball sun circling his head, ignoring the obvious reason it can't be, which we'll get to. And since this ridiculous Jesuit Newtonian hybrid flat Earth model doesn't and can't explain it, and I agree with him 1,000% that that is true, then he thinks it has to be this equally ridiculous globe model, which he spent 10 years debunking thoroughly on the air. That's the either-or fallacy. If it can't be option A, it must be option B.
The thing is, they're not saying it can't be flat, so it must be a globe because I want it to be. They're saying, I tested this. I observed it. The most popular and well-believed flat Earth model fails. The globe model succeeds. Done. That's not a false dilemma. That's just science doing what science does. It eliminates the models that don't work. Now, if you want to put forward a flat Earth model where a 24-hour sun in Antarctica is possible, then be my guest. I won't hold my breath though.
Again, Dave Weiss and Marty Leeds showed there is both motivation, financing, and long available technology to easily fake this. That is option C.
No, that is option classic flat earther. Has there ever been a flat earther in history who's never called something fake? I don't think there has been, has there?
There is option D, that he really did see an apparent cold circling ball of light spinning around his head that the mystery schools, ancients, and Freemasons call an apparent sun or the second sun, which can happen in certain locations when acoustic waves from the source sun way up high in the toroidal field, remember light is just sound vibrations collapsing the ether, which then sends vibrations bouncing down in 3D around the parabolic toroidal field, and they meet at certain sweet spots, creating the other end of those vibrational waves as a visible apparent cold light.
And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else in between. The most nonsensical thing I've heard someone say this year. And that is saying something.
This is no different than TV, radio, and satellite dishes work when they use parabolic reflection. When you watch TV, you wouldn't say the Kardashians are physically living and behaving like retards right there in that dish receiver hooked up to the coaxial cable leading to your TV. They are in a studio too far away for you to see them, being transmitted through vibrational waves from a tower or a satelloon to your dish that bounce off the back of the dish and meet at a sweet spot right there and recreate apparent Kardashians for you to watch. They're not real, but they look real to you.
Someone likes watching the Kardashians. It's okay though, it's okay. We've all got our guilty pleasures.
But their source signal isn't moving around in a giant circle. The distant television tower is dead still, and your dish has only one small parabolic side, so there is only one sweet spot where all the waves meet. In a toroidal field, the source sunlight, or vibrational frequency transmitter, or beginning of the frequency wave, is moving around and has an enclosed 3D toroidal donut shape to bounce those frequency vibration waves off in all directions. So whereas the radio dish has only one still sweet spot the signals can all come back together at to give you an apparent TV or radio station in your coaxial cable, there could be multiple spots all the way around the 3D circular donut shape that will each have an apparent circling reflection point, since the source frequency wave generator, or sun, is circling above and the source is coming from inside the parabolic donut, not from far away outside like a radio dish.
What are you talking about? We have evidence that the sun is a physical object 93 million miles away. You are just making stuff up as you go along, with absolutely no evidence to support your claims. This has turned into an absolute farce. I mean, it was bad before, but blimey.
Just like all these houses can get the same apparent Kardashian show in their living rooms, despite not all being in the exact same place. Think of a stadium rock concert. The guitarist and amp are on a raised stage in the middle of the stadium. The little 4-foot guitar amp is the single source frequency wave generator that can be heard by everyone anywhere in the stadium at the exact same time at any location in that stadium, but it changes in wave amplitude and character and sounds less intense as you get incrementally farther away, and it's too intense and painful to listen to if you're standing front row right in front of the speakers amplifying that guitar amp.
Look, if your explanation requires a universal donut field and a second sun, but not a single peer-reviewed source, or testable prediction, or even working diagram, then it's not science, it's fan fiction. If you want to believe in a toroidal Kardashian field, then that's your right, of course, but don't expect the rest of us to follow suit. And don't try and convince other people on the internet.
Now think of the source sun frequency wave generator circling up top in the red as the guitar amp, the toroidal field around it all as the stadium, and the firmament flat earth plane of inertia in the middle as where everyone is standing listening to the concert. In that stadium, there might be a dozen different bathrooms marked as red dots, scattered in a circle around the outer perimeter in the hallways, and even though the band and guitarist are on the big orange stage in the middle, everyone taking a piss in all dozen of those bathrooms can still hear a less intense version of that same exact source guitar amp at the exact same time as each other, despite not being able to see the stage and being in a dozen totally different locations around the stadium.
What are you talking about? This is quite simply the worst explanation I've ever heard for anything. Anything, I tell you.
That's how sound waves work. And since light is just different frequencies of sound waves vibrating the ether and causing local illumination, now think of the ice wall as bathrooms all the way around the stadium and the real source sun way up high as the guitar amp on stage, far out of actual human sight capability and maybe even too intense and invisible for the human eye frequency band to see. Just like we can't hear dog whistles, but our dog's reactions confirm to us the whistle frequencies are real and there.
Okay, look, I think I've figured out a way to tell this guy he's wrong. The reason we see the sun circling above in Antarctica in December isn't because we've caught a glimpse of an apparent Kardashian frequency guitar solo reflecting off cosmic toilets. It's because the Earth is a globe. Did that work?
Not a single person taking a piss in any of those dozen bathrooms would claim that since they can hear a portion of the sound wave of the guitarist's guitar amp in that bathroom, that is proof that the guitar amp itself must be right there in the bathroom, close and local, and not out on stage in the middle of the stadium, because that would sound like... So when we marry that with parabolic reflection, that TV receiver has to be right exactly there if it wants to recreate an apparent Kardashian show on your TV. If that receiver is any closer to the dish or any bit farther away, or even a few millimeters too far left or right of dead center of that dish and that exact distance from the dish, it won't work at all. Or if it's off by just a tiny bit of millimeters in any direction, it gets some of the signal but has distortions, like you get when you use spherical mirror-shaped reflection instead of parabolic shapes.
Is that a technical term, is it? A tiny bit of millimeters? The thing is, of course, that's not how sunlight works. That's not how optics works. That's not how anything works. The sun isn't bouncing off an invisible torus to trick us. It's where we predict it to be. It follows a calculable path. Its behaviour is entirely consistent with the Earth being a rotating sphere.
That's why we don't use perfectly round spheres for our TV and radio dishes. They leave this weird football-shaped distortion. Instead, we use parabolic shapes more like an oblate spheroid donut shape based on a toroidal field, because they have a nice crisp reflection point, so long as the source frequency isn't moving.
Think about what you're saying here, that dishes only work if the source isn't moving. Tell that to the thousands of satellites constantly tracked across the sky, feeding GPS, internet and weather data.
Many people have pointed out the sun often turned into a squished oval American football shape in the 24-hour sun time-lapse footage they took in Antarctica. Obviously, that can't happen to a giant Jesuit space fireball 93 million miles away, so they are stuck trying to physically explain it away as some kind of camera distortion or digital rendering problem, because their brains can't think metaphysically that it may be distortions in the apparent sun wave, since the source sun above is moving.
Actually, it was explained perfectly by Dave McKeegan, who took the footage. He explained the footage was taken with a 360-degree camera, which is two 180-degree lenses stitched together. The warping of the sun is when it passes between the stitching of those two 180-degree lenses. So no issue with the sun itself, just the camera used.
It is even more distorted and obvious on the video footage on the left that suddenly appeared out of nowhere, claiming to be taken by someone a few years earlier, but for some reason nobody could find until now. When you put it in negative, it's very obvious. The same phenomenon is happening.
This footage is from Anthony Powell and was available when it came out in 2015. The sun appears distorted in this one when it's low to the horizon, because of atmospheric refraction. The light bends through layers of air, especially in freezing places like Antarctica, where temperature inversions bend the light. It's real footage taken in a real atmosphere on a spinning Earth.
And because neither of their Jesuit Newtonian materialism models can account for a giant space fireball suddenly squishing into a blob 2 or 2.5 times wider than it normally is, they have no choice but to fall back into either or logical fallacy thinking. It's either the camera digital rendering doing that, or it's some kind of atmospheric mirage, even though clearly neither of those happen when people film the 24-hour summer sun in the north of Sweden, Finland, Lapland, even though the atmosphere has more humidity there to distort vision.
First of all, it does happen. Photographs of the midnight sun in places like Norway or Sweden often show things like flattened suns and sun pillars, plus shimmering effects and lens flares. The Antarctic air is often colder, creating stronger temperature gradients near the surface. These cause stronger refractive bending than the more humid but thermally stable air in Scandinavia. Humidity isn't the main issue. Temperature, inversion, and angle of observation are.
It must seem like magic to them, so they just don't address this obvious problem. Do you see a giant squishy blob in the northern summer 24-hour sun? This fallacious thinking also stops their brain from asking the obvious next logical question. If that really is a giant magic space fireball on either model, how is it that the Lapland cities like Longyearbyen on Norway's Svalbard Island and the rest are all having their hottest and most humid months of the year during their months of 24-hour summer sun from June 21st through mid-August up to 10 degrees Celsius, which is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, even though it's below freezing or just above the rest of the year?
If the sun is up 24 hours a day, every day for several months, the ground has more time to absorb heat. It accumulates warmth. Permafrost melts. Wildlife migrates. It's called summer. If he goes where I think he's about to go, this is not going to end well for him.
And pay attention, they're allegedly on 78.13 degrees northern latitude. Yet Jaron and crew are standing down in Union Glacier in December under their alleged 24-hour summer sun on the exact same alleged latitude ring as Kunlun Station, 80.2 degrees south latitude, so nearly identical to their northern Longyearbyen Svalbard counterpart. Union Glacier and Kunlun allegedly already having a 24-hour sun since a month earlier on November 21st, yet after a month of 24-hour sun, it's not 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit on Union Glacier like it is in their northern Longyearbyen's twin counterpart in their summer. Jaron and crew are freezing their asses off in -4 to -6 Celsius or 21 to 24 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing.
Yep, he went there. Just because two locations share a similar latitude at opposite sides of the planet doesn't mean they'll have the same temperature. Svalbard is near sea level and sits in the path of warm Atlantic currents, especially the Gulf Stream. Union Glacier in Antarctica, that's 2,000 meters above sea level. It's on an ice sheet that reflects sunlight in the middle of the coldest, driest, windiest continent on Earth. And yes, it does stay cold in Antarctica, even under the 24-hour sun. But not because the sun is fake, but because the ground is ice, the elevation is high, and it's surrounded by the coldest ocean on the planet.
The globe model says, yeah, there's Svalbard at 78 degrees northern latitude, and there's Union Glacier at nearly identical 80 degrees south latitude. And since Svalbard is allegedly tilted towards the sun in its summer, that's why it is having 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degree Fahrenheit weather and a 24-hour sun instead of below freezing like usual, and also why it is having 76% humidity, as evaporating water and ice from heat causes humidity.
Okay, great, that's fine. Please don't now go and repeat your argument then.
Paradoxically, when its latitude twin Union Glacier allegedly faces the exact same alleged space fireball for its summer and alleged months of 24-hour sun, that fireball doesn't heat them up at all. It keeps them well below freezing and magically never melts any ice or snow. While the North gets 76% humidity, when the retards were all screaming about Vapegate, as Jaron rightly explained, you can't see your breath in Antarctica because there is 0.0023% humidity, not 76%.
Yep, he has. Brilliant. That's not a paradox, it's climate science. Let's clear this up. The sun shines on both poles during their respective summers. That's a fact, but what matters is how the air and ground responds. In the Arctic, you've got ocean water and rock, and darker land surfaces that absorbs and holds onto heat. In Antarctica, you've got an icy plateau 2,000 meters high, covered in snow that reflects most sunlight, in air that's dry and cold, and thin enough to let heat escape. Humidity, of course it's higher in the Arctic summer. There's melting going on. In Antarctica, nothing melts. That's why it's still a continent of ice and not a water park. I hope that clears things up. Please don't repeat it again.
One would think any rational person would put this all together and start to question if they are seeing a metaphysical electromagnetic light phenomenon or even fake technology, since either way, it defies all attributes of a physical space fireball. But apparently not.
No, it doesn't. And no one's questioning that. I don't think the sun is a metaphysical electromagnetic light phenomenon, or that it's fake by technology. Just you and your friend and a sprinkling of flat earthers.
I need to tie this all together so we can get to these two smoking guns, Rothera and San Martin, which absolutely debunk Jaron's fallacies and false claims.
Really? Because your smoking guns have not been that smoking so far.
Remember, Jaron has made the claims, not me. So I don't have to prove anything, I just have to disprove his. His first claim that the Earth must be a globe because it's the only way this globe software can so accurately predict sunrise, sunset times, day lengths, etc., has already been destroyed and will be slam dunk flushed down the toilet shortly with even more undeniable proof.
I hardly doubt that, but go on.
His second claim is that seeing a 24-hour sun in Antarctica can only happen on a globe, which Dave Weiss and Marty Leeds have shown can be faked.
No, they haven't. I mean, I don't even say that lightly. They have no clue what they're talking about. They guessed and ummed their way through a video. That's all.
So that alone destroys Jaren's claim. Whether that sun was faked or not, it is a real possibility that must be explored and debunked before Jaren's claim has any validity. And I will show you that a 24-hour sun is absolutely possible in certain areas on a flat plane of inertia inside a metaphysical toroidal field at certain times of the year, which also destroys Jaren's baseless claim that it can only happen on a globe.
You haven't shown that at all. You've said that and then provided no evidence to support it. More guesswork and hopefulness, I think.
Whether what I propose is actually happening or not, it is a real possibility which must be further researched and disproven before it can be taken off the table and any validity given to Jaren's second baseless claim.
No, it doesn't work that way round, I'm afraid. You need to make the prediction and then experimentally prove it. Otherwise, I can make up a model that says Flurf tears power the sun, and then expect people to research it and disprove it before we can say it's not so. Nonsensical stuff.
So an airplane drops 6 or so people off here, and they see and film what looks like a 24-hour circling summer sun that magically doesn't melt ice or snow or cause humidity like its northern counterpart, and they have no clue if here is here or if here is really here.
Well, they do. They were independently tracked with GPS, and Critical Think even filmed the flight.
Just like channel apparent but not real source Kardashians will never turn up anywhere in this dish except this sweet spot right here, the apparent circling sun source wave frequencies will never appear anywhere else off the toroidal field than here, not here and not further out here. So if Union Glacier is really here, they could see the apparent sun circling around them overhead because its source frequency transmitter or real sun is circling overhead, and the waves are focusing now off of a three-dimensional toroidal donut dish, not a little partial one-sided dish off your roof like the Kardashians with a non-circling transmitter tower.
Total nonsense and totally unproven. All of that. You expect people to just believe you. Of course you do, you're a flat earther.
But even these are just oversimplified two-dimensional cross-representations of wave behavior. A toroidal field is three-dimensional, so Union Glacier here could be seen rather like this. Think of them being dropped off here, or there, because since the toroidal field is an enclosed 360-degree parabolic donut-shaped TV dish, and the transmitting source frequency is circling inside the dish, not a stationary tower far away, the same exact wave signal could possibly appear anywhere and everywhere in that sweet spot around the dish, simultaneously at the exact same time and sweet spot location all around an ice wall.
I'm so sorry, I zoned out then. Did you say anything important or different? Did they, guys? Yeah, thought not.
No different than everyone in every bathroom around the Rock Stadium still getting to hear the apparent end of the guitar amp wave frequency, but not the actual guitar amp source frequency itself at the exact same time. Just because the amp isn't in the bathroom next to you doesn't mean you can't experience it.
What are you talking about? I'm sorry, but my patience has been tested enough for this episode. Coming up with rubbish like this and just expecting people to believe it. Unreal, it really is.
Again, this is not to make any claim that this is what is actually going on. That might not be what's happening at all. It is only to show that we can observe this kind of phenomenon in various cymatic experiments and techniques, using things like cymoscopes, where audible sound waves make visible light in water mediums via their vibrations, as do experiments like the famous star in the jar. So again, One cannot claim a 24-hour sun in one spot in Antarctica can only be explained by the globe model.
Let's be crystal clear here. Cymatics is nothing but sound vibrations making patterns in a medium. It has absolutely nothing to do with the path of the sun across the sky or Earth's axial tilt. And that star in a jar, that's solar luminescence. Light flashes caused by collapsing bubbles in a liquid. Again, nothing to do with the fact that you can literally film the sun circling above you for 24 hours in Antarctica. If you need cymatics or sololuminescence to explain why the sun doesn't set at the South Pole, you've already lost. The globe explains it perfectly with axial tilt.
This is a very real and repeatable phenomenon that would have to be studied and debunked, just like the possibility this was faked with plasma technology, before moving on to any such claim.
Science doesn't work on debunk until proven false. It works on evidence in favour. You don't get to invent a plasma hologram the size of the sun and then sit back and say, well, it's your job to prove me wrong. No, it's your job to prove you right. Until then, it's just word salad. To fake the Antarctica midnight sun with plasma tech, you'd need a projector bigger than most countries, with 360-degree coverage, visible from multiple research bases and cruise ships, and it would need to sync perfectly with orbital mechanics. Solar output and every single telescope on Earth. Nonsense, I think.
Which brings us back to these two bases, Rothera and San Martin, the only two bases allegedly on the Antarctic Peninsula claiming to have 24-hour sun periods. They are nearly on identical south latitude lines. Rothera allegedly on 67.33 degrees south and San Martin allegedly on 68.07 south.
Again, the coordinates are wrong. And also, this is not nearly identical. It's over half a degree apart. That's over 35 miles.
Just 47 miles east and west of each other, with only a 10.5-mile difference between their alleged latitude locations.
No, it's not a 10.5-mile difference in latitude. You've orientated your map incorrectly for one. They're actually 38 miles apart exactly in latitude.
Closer than you probably drive to work and back each day, and a jogger could casually run their measly latitude difference in an hour or less on foot.
Casually run 10 miles in an hour? You clearly don't run. My PB for 10 miles is 1 hour 17 minutes, and I was not running casually.
Again, as Jaron says, we cannot live on a globe if the identical latitudes don't have matching day lengths and same identical date periods of alleged 24-hour sun and non-24-hour sun.
But they are not identical latitudes. Identical means identical, as in exactly the same, not off by half a degree.
So timeanddate.com reports San Martin's alleged 24-hour sun starts November 27th, 3 full days earlier than it reports Rothera, just 10.5 miles north. Impossible. And dateandtime.info says, no. San Martin's alleged 24-hour sun starts November 25th, and Rothera's November 28th. Another 3 days difference, and that is also 2 full days earlier than Time and Date's alleged start dates. So not only do they debunk themselves, they debunk each other.
Except they don't, because it's not 10 miles. And again, they're not the exact same latitude.
Then timeanddate.com claims the alleged 24-hour sun period ends for San Martin as late as January 16th and Rothera's January 13th, meaning San Martin is having 6 more days of an alleged 24-hour sun than Rothera, despite being only 10 miles south. Get out of here.
Amazing how confident he is, isn't it, considering he fluffed his distance calculations.
Date and Time claims even a day longer for San Martin on the end, with the 24-hour sun ending January 17th, not 16th, and Rothera ending a day later on January 14th, not 13th. 2 bases on nearly identical latitude having 45 days of 24-hour sun? Or is it 48 days? Or is it 51 days? Or is it 54 days? That's a 9-day difference between the shortest 45 days and longest 54 days claim, 47 miles apart from each other and 10 miles north of each other.
All of this was argued on a premise he got wrong, of course. Would he acknowledge this if we pointed it out to him? I don't know if he would.
And Jaron cannot have his cake and eat it too, because if he claims this software is just not accurate, that debunks his claim that the globe model is proven by its accurate software predictions. And again, when we go to the last day, they both at least agree there was no 24-hour sun, despite both sites agreeing on each base's solar noon times to the exact second and claiming to know their day lengths precisely to the exact second.
We spoke about this before. Solar noon isn't something the base commander is eyeballing. It's calculated from longitude and Earth's rotation to the second.
Rothera is off by 20 minutes and San Martin is off by 53 minutes. And they're off by that much from each other, despite a 10-mile latitude difference. Again, their median latitude between their alleged 67.33 south and 68.07 south is 67.7 south latitude, putting the alleged Earth rotation and sun speed at 394.7 miles per hour or 6.57 miles per second, meaning the sun would travel that 10.5 miles latitude difference in just under 2 seconds. Not 53 minutes.
Oh, not this nonsense again. Converting a north-south distance into seconds of time with a ground speed for the sun is pure nonsense. It's meaningless and shows a massive lack of physics understanding.
And yes, the same crap happens on the first day they at least agree the alleged 24-hour sun period ends in mid-January. Same solar noon times, but the day lengths are off by 24 minutes for Rothera, now 56 minutes for San Martin, and as long from each other. But it's not even just that. Because Rothera allegedly sits on the identical latitude ring with Mawson base, and nearly the same ring as Molodesnaya, Casey, and Mirny base. And San Martin allegedly sits on an identical latitude ring with Davis base, and nearly Leningradskaya, Druznaya, and Neumayer too, so we can compare those as well.
I can pretty much guarantee that none of these are on the exact same latitude.
Obviously, sunrise and sunset times and solar noons wouldn't be the same on a spinning globe, but day lengths and dates of alleged 24-hour sun periods have to match, or we cannot be on a globe. And let me clarify, because astute minds and even Jaron will rightly say, well, why is it that these latitude day lengths are matching up elsewhere on the Earth but not Antarctica? Obviously, Jaron did not go physically double-check those day lengths with his own eyes and a clock to verify it's not just software filling in predictive latitude calculations via GPS coordinates.
At high latitudes, the sun is skating along the horizon at shallow angles. That means local terrain, mountains, cliffs, refraction. They can all nudge observed sunrise or sunset times by tens of minutes. You can't demand exact second matches when one station has a clear sea horizon, for example, and the other has a mountain ridge to the west. This is something you have ignored through the entire documentary.
But let's say they are correct. It's simple, because once you understand the paths and changing altitudes of the luminaries going around the latitude circles between the tropics, the sun raising 1 degree per day up the Christmas tree vortex for 6 months from Capricorn to Cancer, and lowering 1 degree per day on the way back out, and the moon doing 13.22 degrees up per day for 14 days a month and down for 14 days, it's true. No matter which ring the apparent sun's wave is traveling around between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, anywhere else on any point around that same ring should experience the same.
If the sun were circling latitude lines like a train on tracks, then every location on that circle would see the same sunrise, sunset and day length. But we don't, do we? That's why London and Calgary, for example, can have wildly different daylight hours in June versus December. The only model that explains that, a rotating tilted globe.
This does not require or prove a globe. It happens the exact same on the flat Earth map, and software can also be made using these same angular calculations on a flat Earth map. We know which rings they are on based on which days because our entire Gregorian calendar is set up around the cardinal point solstices and equinoxes on the zodiac, and we celebrate holidays there to remind us. They never change.
That is not how models work though. You can plot the numbers on any shape you like, a circle, a square, or even a napkin. But the moment you test that against real world distances and time zones and travel, your theory falls apart. You seem to think the burden is on us to disprove your theory in order for it not to be true. That is the completely wrong way round.
And even on the flat Earth system, this should be happening for these Antarctic bases allegedly on the same latitude lines as each other, yet they are not reporting the same. So the question is that because they are squeezing them onto a completely fictional round continent that doesn't exist in reality?
No, and you still ignore the fact that the 24-hour sun itself is impossible on your map.
For example, Rothera Base is on the exact same alleged 67.33 south latitude ring as Mawson Base, even though they are across the entire alleged continent.
No, they are not. Rothera Base is 67.562 degrees south. Mawson Base is at 67.603 degrees south. Very close, but not exact.
What happens in latitude stays in latitude, and Rothera is just less than 1 degree latitude difference from Molodezhnaya, Casey, and Mirny Base, also way across the alleged continent. Remember, from other bases on that latitude like Davis and Zhongshan, with a 0.9 to 1 degree latitude difference, this is only 32 to 36 miles difference in latitude, not some huge distance.
But we've already stated this before. At these high latitudes, small difference in latitude can make a big difference, certainly compared to the sun at lower latitudes.
So the alleged 24-hour sun must start on the same day for Rothera and Mawson, not maybe November 28th, 29th, or 30th, a 3-day difference.
Interestingly, it hasn't mentioned here that individual sites match start days on each site.
Depending on whose accurate globe software you ask. And we are to believe that the alleged 24-hour sun for 3 other bases on 32 to 36 miles latitude away don't start their 24-hour suns until December 7th, or is it 10th, or is it December 5th? These 3 are off by 3 days from each other for the exact same base, and the total area for that latitude is November 28th to December 10th, a 13-day discrepancy?
Yes, across bases over 1 degree apart. Not uncommon at all.
Molodezhnaya is on 66.39 south latitude, 6 miles latitude difference from Mirny, yet the Russians say Molodezhnaya starts November 29th, 7 days earlier than Mirny. How does Molodezhnaya's 24-hour sun start before or on the same day as Rothera or Mawson if it is 32 miles farther north or away from the alleged South Pole in latitude than they are? It's the same with the alleged ending of the alleged 24-hour sun. So when is it, oh accurate globe model software oracle? January 12th, 13th, 14th, 11th, 3rd, 5th, 7th? That's a 12-day discrepancy, but at least 1 more day accurate than the 13 days going in.
He just isn't getting it, is he? And honestly, I'm bored of the spreadsheet stuff.
At least being on identical alleged latitude rings, Rothera and Mawson have to have identical day lengths as each other on the dates before and after they at least agree there was no alleged 24-hour sun, or we don't live on a globe. And they don't. These two disagree by 37 minutes on how long Rothera's day length even is. Despite claiming to be so accurate, they can measure the day to 10 seconds or 34 seconds, not just the minute. and they disagree by 32 minutes on Mawson, despite, again, accuracy to the second.
Once again, two different sites that use different sets of data not agreeing doesn't mean anything. And again, they're not on the exact same latitude. Very close, but not exact. We don't know the elevation of these stations either, which will make a massive difference too. You are literally going back to the same argument that you made in the first 10 minutes of this documentary. And you're using it again 1 hour and 40 minutes later. Shockingly bad.
One claims Mawson gets nearly 10 more minutes of daylight than Rothera, and the other says, no, Mawson gets 14 more minutes than Rothera. Except at 67.33 south latitude, you're talking about an alleged Earth rotation speed moving the sun at 401 miles per hour, or 6.6 miles per minute, which is 85 miles of inaccuracy over 13 minutes, and 32-minute difference is like saying you didn't notice 211 miles of extra sunlight, despite each claiming day length accuracy to the exact second.
You're doing the sun thing again. The sun's apparent speed across the sky isn't what's relevant here. What matters is where on Earth you're measuring from. Rothera and Mawson aren't next door neighbours, they're 5,000 kilometres apart. So naturally, the exact moment the sun clears the horizon will differ because of the local horizon, the terrain, the refraction, plus the longitude. They're all different. That's why no scientist expects those day lengths to be carbon copies. You were wrong at the start of the documentary about that, and you're wrong now.
You can't have your cake and eat it too. But look at November 27th. A 51-minute day-length discrepancy for Rothera, despite each claiming accuracy to the second. A 46-minute day-length discrepancy for Mawson, despite the same. Again, it's an inconsistent inconsistency. How can you disagree by 51 minutes for Rothera on November 27th, but only 27 minutes January 15th? Or by 46 minutes for Mawson November 27th, but only 32 minutes January 15th. Again, while claiming your stats are all accurate to the exact second.
Once again, timeanddate.com and dateandtime.org are websites that use different astronomical models, different reference data, and sometimes even different definitions of what sunrise and sunsets actually are. Timeanddate.com, for example, defines sunrise as the instant the upper limb of the sun breaks the horizon. Another site might use the center of the sun or the entirety of the sun before they call it a sunrise. That means boom, you've got an instant 5, 10 or 20 minute difference, especially at high latitudes where the sun crawls across the horizon.
And it's more damning when we look at the other two bases we have day-length stats on, Casey and Mirny, allegedly only 32 to 36 miles north in latitude. How, on November 27th, even though nobody can agree it's day length, can Casey only be getting, let's just average 21 hours of day length, while Rothera is claiming 23 and a half hours, 2.5 hours more, or Mirny getting 2 hours less than Rothera or Mawson.
First, Casey and Rothera are not neighbours. They're nearly 8,000 miles apart on opposite sides of the continent. Again, different horizons, different longitudes, different terrain and different time zones. Latitude is not the only factor that matters. Second, Antarctic isn't a perfect flat plain. It's a jagged, mountainous, ice-covered continent. A base with a mountain ridge to the east will see the sun set earlier, whilst another on a flat coastline may catch it longer. That alone can shave off or add hours to the apparent day length.
Imagine the sun sets at 7 p.m. in Pompano Beach, Florida. So you just drive 32 miles south from Pompano Beach to Miami to get 2.5 more hours sunlight until 9:30 p.m. because Miami is 32 miles closer to the Tropic of Cancer, where the sun goes by in the summer. Since the minutely larger Miami latitude ring is 32 miles closer to the alleged sun 93 million miles away. That is obviously ridiculous to believe these two latitude lines would have a 2.5 hour day length difference, yet here we are, led to believe the same in Antarctica.
Florida and Antarctica aren't remotely comparable. First, Florida's near the tropics with the sun high overhead. That means it crosses the sky steeply. That means the difference in daylight between latitudes a few miles apart is tiny, maybe a minute or two, but in Antarctica it's a totally different story. Down there, the sun is skimming along the horizon at shallow angles in the summer. A stretch of just a fraction of a degree in latitude can stretch or shrink the visible day by some time. Please stop making ridiculous comparisons.
And again, the same problem January 15th, off by nearly 2 hours. When facts aren't actually factual, Jaron, we don't call that the truth. We call that imagination. It will probably come as no surprise by now that it's even worse when we compare San Martin base to its alleged latitude ring twin bases, Davis, Leningradskaya, Druzhnaya, and Neumayer 2.
All of that's irrelevant though, as these stations are, for one, not the exact same latitude, at different heights above sea level, sit on wildly different terrains. I mean, there's so many differences here that comparing the times and hoping for the exact same day length is laughable. I'm not going to listen to him list all those times and dates again. Let's skip past this bit.
As this film is approaching 2 hours long, I see no point in beating a dead fallacy further. My research should be repeatable, verifiable, and more importantly, refutable or falsifiable if I am wrong. Jaron claims that if you move the latitude around the globe, the daylight hours never change. More impressive is that they, quote, all without exception match exactly their counterpart. False. We have shown without exception not even a single one in Antarctica matches its latitude counterpart in not only day length, but even if the sun is allegedly up all day that day or not.
I think Jaron's point only works if the places are the exact same latitude, have the exact same terrain surrounding them, and are at the exact same elevation. That's never going to be the case. We've established all the flaws in your proof and exposed them for being less than accurate. You've not proven anything, I'm afraid.
Jaron used one software that he played around on for a few hours and saw that locations on same latitudes have identical properties on that Andrew Marsh model. Great, except you have to check it against other programs and sites to see if they match as well.
The irony here is that flat earthers love to say, don't trust the models. But here they are treating Jaron's afternoon of tinkering with one as scripture. It really is so hypocritical.
Jaron claims that if you map the Earth on a sphere, then every sunrise and sunset time and angle is predicted and explained and accounted for every single location there is, the entire globe, and all places on it. The globe predicts this with 100% accuracy, and no one has ever been able to correctly map this place unless they place us on a sphere.
Absolutely true. No flat earth map has ever worked. Are they going to say, actually, we've got a map that works? Or are they going to continue attacking our model? Let's see.
False. Every single one of the sites shown in this film claim we live on a spherical globe and hence all use global mapping for their data. And in not even one single instance were any of them able to agree on even a single sunrise time, sunset time, length of day, or even what date the sun allegedly stopped going down. Not even once. All wildly off from each other.
What a surprise. Could have predicted that, ignoring the fact that no flat earth map has ever correctly predicted anything, of course.
And since 3 to 6 sources, all with conflicting data, cannot all be telling the truth, all but one have to be lying or incorrect. And since you cannot tell which one, you have no clue or proof they aren't all lying.
No, that's not how data works. Different sources can disagree without anyone lying. They're just using different assumptions, models, or definitions. Flat earthers treat disagreement like a smoking gun. In reality, it's just normal uncertainty in measurement and modeling.
Most importantly, seeing and filming this etheric light vibration circling around your head in one location with no further questions, doubts, or investigation having never even been to any of the other locations claiming to experience the same phenomenon, to double check that their claims are even true, and even if you did go check and they do experience it as well, is not proof that this must be a burning space fireball 93 million miles away.
But it is proof that the Flat Earth AE map doesn't work. And that was the entire point of the trip, which you seem to have missed.
Or that this dumb shit you spent 10 years debunking thoroughly is the only other choice available to explain it, especially when it doesn't do to your location what it provably does to its northern alleged latitude counterpart during their 24-hour circling summer light period. That is just either or fallacious thinking. That's fine for opinion, but not acceptable as claim or proof, truth or fact, and frankly, claiming that anyone who doesn't agree with your factless and disprovable opinion is going against God, who would not deceive the world by showing us that the Earth matches a globe model, is maniacal and fanatical. God complex much, anyone?
That's called a false dilemma, by the way. In real science, when models and observations don't match perfectly, we don't leap to the entire shape of the planet is wrong. We refine the models and check the assumptions and account for variables like terrain, refraction, elevation and time zones. The globe isn't disproved every time two websites give different sunrise times.
So here's my opinion, not claim of proof, truth or fact, open to change with new information. See what I did there, Jaron? On why I suspect they are lying and it's not the software. I went into 10 of the many bases on the Antarctic Peninsula who don't claim to have a 24-hour sun period at all and just used December 21st as a benchmark date to check their sunrise, sunset times, day lengths, and solar noons on that day.
So these are the bases that are all outside of the Antarctic Circle. This means that technically there's no 24-hour sun. However, it must be noted that these bases probably still get 24 hours of daylight in the summer. The sky never really gets dark there in the summer. You get what's called a polar twilight, essentially a 24-hour period of daylight plus twilight, without true night. Just keep that in mind.
As always, the bases that had two sites to double check against all agreed on the exact same solar noon time, like Esperanza, Mariambo, Orcadas, and Palmer Station.
No surprise here, solar noon is one of the easiest things in the world to predict. We've known how to do it for centuries. You just look at longitude and the Earth's rotation and bang, you know exactly when the sun will be at its highest point in the sky.
Yet as always, not once did either of their almighty globe software also get identical times for any of their sunrise, sunsets, or day lengths, disproving once again Jaron's claims that these globe softwares are so accurate that their accuracy proves the globe. They are as accurate as hitting a guy with a shotgun spray and claiming you scored a direct headshot.
So when the software predictions do match reality, it's a conspiracy. And when they don't, it's somehow still proof of a conspiracy. Here's the thing though, sunrise and sunset aren't as razor sharp as solar noon is. Atmospheric refraction bends light. Local terrain blocks horizons. And weather patterns can shift what you see on the ground. But solar noon, that's clean geometry. And the software nails that every single time.
But the thing is, if you pause and look, they are only off from each other by 7 to 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the longest, consistently. Nothing as wildly off as 50 minutes to over 2 hours, like when we looked at the days before and after alleged 24-hour sun periods for the bases alleging those periods. So how is it their softwares are suddenly consistently closer to each other for these bases, yet so wildly off and inconsistent for the bases of suspect?
Here's the key though, the closer you are to the South Pole, the trickier these times get, because tiny changes in angle make a big difference in how long the sun remains above the horizon. That's why the times for the bases near the poles look sometimes inconsistent. But as you move further north in latitude, away from the South Pole, the geometry smooths out and the software lines up far more neatly with what we'd expect.
My opinion and theory, not claim of fact, see what I did there, Jaron, is that these bases are really all geographically here, outside of the sweet spot of the apparent 24-hour sun, so there is no reason to fudge their data.
Oh, you mean the sweet spot where you somehow come up with some magical reasoning? Actually, it was nonsensical reasoning as to how the sun can be seen for 24 hours on a flat Earth model. That sweet spot.
Another thing I find suspicious is that Union Glacier is one of the few places they actually take tourists to all of the time. Yet none of the online sites, timeanddate.com, dateandtime.info, timegenie.com, sunriseandsunset.com, etc., bother to give their location, sunrise and sunset times, day lengths, solar noons, or period of alleged 24-hour sun. Isn't that one place people would want to know?
These websites don't list every tent, rock or airstrip on the continent. They use established settlements and research stations, those that have permanent coordinates. Union Glacier is a seasonal camp that often gets packed up and moved. That's why it doesn't appear in every online database.
It's also conveniently in the middle of nowhere. So for those in the Dave Weiss, Marty Leeds camp that this may have been faked with plasma technology, it is the perfect place to do it, and I would suggest people digging into it should look at Lieutenant Arturo Parodi, a Chilean military base. That's where they would have done it from, and strangely, it's supposed to be just northeast of Union Glacier Station, but when you take its alleged GPS coordinates and paste them into Google Earth, it takes you in the opposite direction of Union Glacier, south, and when you zoom into those coordinates, there is absolutely nothing there.
Union Glacier isn't really just the camp. It's the entire glacier, which covers over 70 kilometres. As I said, the camp is seasonal, built on top of that glacier. And every year it can be shifted around a bit, depending on snow conditions, runways and logistics. It's not a cover-up. It's just that Union Glacier is the whole glacier, while the camp is a temporary dot on top of it.
Lastly, for this film's time's sake, when we look at Rothera and Vernadsky bases, the two closest bases to each other where one, Rothera, is allegedly having periods of 24-hour sun and the other, Vernadsky, is admittedly not, there is a strange anomaly there that makes one have to suspect the legitimacy of Rothera's claim. Vernadsky is 193 miles northeast of Rothera, which you can see is 2 full degrees of latitude north, from Rothera's 67.33 to Vernadsky's 65.14.
Still getting coordinates wrong at the end of this documentary, but yes, please continue.
And Vernadsky is only 4 degrees east of Rothera at 64.15 west longitude to Rothera's 68.7 west longitude, which is what we see here. Note that they are both exactly in the same time zone, UTC minus 3 hours. So what I'm about to show you cannot be explained by a time zone difference.
2 degrees of latitude might not sound like much, but down there is the difference between midnight sun and midnight dusk.
For Rothera in yellow, Wednesday, November 27th is the last day Rothera claims not to have an alleged 24-hour sun. So we can at least compare that date to Vernadsky in purple to its northeast. We can see that Vernadsky gets its solar noon, the time when the actual apparent sun is closest to it, at 1:04 p.m. for their time zone, and 16 minutes later, Rothera gets its solar noon at 1:20 p.m., meaning it took the actual apparent sun 16 minutes to travel from east to west between those two base longitudes.
16 minutes, that's bang on what you'd expect. As you know, the Earth rotates at 15 degrees per hour, or roughly 1 degree every 4 minutes. Vernadsky is around 4 degrees east of Rothera, so solar noon arriving 16 minutes earlier is exactly right.
Yet they claim the sun rose that morning an hour and 17 minutes later at Vernadsky than Rothera. Rothera's sunrise first at 1:34 a.m. and Vernadsky's second at 2:51 a.m. The source sun cannot outrun its preceding sunlight that it is the source of any more than this flashlight can get ahead of its own light beam off in the distance. The sun's preceding light cannot reach Rothera an hour and 17 minutes before Vernadsky in the morning, but then reach Vernadsky first 16 minutes before Rothera in the afternoon.
See, this only looks like a paradox if you imagine the sun like a torch beam sweeping across a flat tabletop. Sunrise depends on latitude and how the sun scrapes the horizon. That's why Rothera, further south, picks it up earlier. Solar noon though is purely about longitude. Vernadsky's further east, so of course it hits noon first. Two different rules, two different results, and both exactly what you'd expect on a globe.
When you are told to accept this as reality and to accept this as reality because of accurate globe computer software modeling, and then aside from these two, not even a single other one out of over 400 data points agree with either themselves or each other and verify that claim, who in sane and sound mind would base their beliefs on that?
Well, no one, because the Earth being a globe doesn't rest on the misunderstandings of data points on a huge spreadsheet.
I have admittedly been unfairly harsh to Jaron in this film without walking a mile in his shoes, and my brother Marty Leeds has reminded me to tread with compassion. Thank you, Marty. And I have presented my own opinions in this film, which may be just as wrong as the fallacies I have debunked here.
You've debunked nothing, and you were wrong about your theory, yes.
I don't claim to know how this realm works, only how I can prove it doesn't.
That right there in a nutshell is how flat earthers think, and it's honestly totally ridiculous. That's like me saying I can't tell you how this pen works, but I know that it definitely doesn't write. Nonsensical statement.
I am not claiming my Antarctica research to be the end-all, only a starting point for others to expand on. I'm just a one-man shop and asking others to take this research, find other sources, and add to it. Verify me, debunk me if I am wrong. I'm open to it. To double-check my info, for dateandtime.info, select continents.
It's okay, no need for that. Thank you very much. Well, if that is it, then I guess this is the end. I'm kinda sad. I really do hope you enjoyed this mini-series. The Flat Earth documentary Scamtarctica has now been fully debunked in its entirety. As I said, the Supercut version will be out soon, but for now, I'm going to wrap this one up.